I find that beginners overtrain, but they don't train hard enough. They're the guys who train 6 days a week, 20, 30 sets of body part. They never get any results because they don't train hard. The other thing that drives me nuts is I'll see people teach the lifts horribly. And then they'll say, well, we're not power lifters. And it's like, well, I'm not a chef, but I don't put tinfoil in the microwave. So if you're going to teach it correctly.
Time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Matt Wiedemer. He was out before with Stan Efferding. I forget the episode. I want to say 96, but I could be completely wrong on that. I should have looked it up. I didn't. Matt is the founder of Beat Fitness, co-owner of Perillo Performance, has over 2 decades as a strength coach / personal trainer, 2 decades competing as a powerlifting with 3 elite totals. He was part of the morning crew when I was at Westside, so there should be some good stories to be able to come from this. And he's worked with everybody from Gen Pop to D1 athletes to top professional athletes, MMA fighters, so we kind of got a whole lot of ground to cover. Yeah. For those people that don't know you, let's just go back to, I don't want to go back to like when you're in high school. Yeah. Well, actually, we kind of do, because that's when did you start coming into Westside? Because it was around 2001. Yeah. Was that high school or was that because it was high school and college, right?
Yeah, so remember that Joe Collins was my high school strength coach, and he got me into Olympic lifting. And I competed, and I got to junior nationals as an Olympic lifter.
Did you not tell us that?
No, I don't know. I mean, I never even think about it, honestly. And what's funny is...
We would have ragged on that like you can't believe.
Oh, I'm sure you can. But the first time he said, there's this guy in Columbus with all these 800-pound squatters and 800-pound deadlifters, which... It still at that point really didn't register how good that was. But the first time I came up, it was you, Chuck, Kenny, Joe McCoy, maybe someone else I can't remember. You're having a pin pull contest, and Louie wasn't there. And Kenny's like, what the hell are you guys doing here? And I'm like skinny, 18 years old, no cell phones. I mean, I think about back in those days is we could have been in the back alley. No one would have ever known.
Yeah. And I mean, we were kind of like right in the projects.
Yeah, in the blacked out windows.
Yeah.
And so Joe and I are against the back wall, and Joe just goes, if they don't want to let us out of here, we're probably stuck.
Yeah.
And then Louie didn't remember us coming. So like Joe, anyway, long story short, then I came up the next time with Joe. Louie talks me into coming up Mondays and Fridays for the squat and the dynamic day. And then from there, I got to work with Buddy. I think I met Buddy through Joe as well. So Buddy Morris, and I worked for him for the Browns, and then I started my own gym.
Did you start with him with Pitt first?
Yeah. Yeah, there's all sorts of guys back then. Like, no one ever talks about, like, Buddy will strangle me for even mentioning it, but I remember, like, John Davies, all those guys. I got lucky. This guy at the gym the other day goes, how do you know all these people? I said, pure luck.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking to Louie. I didn't realize who Louie really was. And then you get to meet Buddy, and I don't really understand how good Buddy but it was.
Yeah, then Muslinsky kind of falls in there. It just kind of all kind of trickles down that same path. Because I kind of remember he's like that track guy.
Yeah.
So how many years were you coming in? Because I know that you were there long enough that we didn't just see you as the track guy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because you kept coming.
Yeah.
Right. And then hell, we didn't realize till like months later that you were driving from Miami.
Yeah.
From University of Miami.
Yeah.
Down to be able to do this. And that was a little bit more respect there as well.
Yeah.
So how long were you making that trip back?
Probably 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah. And it was fun. I mean, you learn a lot. You learn how to work, and you learn like to get serious, which I didn't have a problem with. That's what I was looking for. But you guys were, I mean, it was, I got a million stories I can think of that you might not even remember.
Yeah, that's why I want to talk to you to see what are some stories that you remember. Because it's, for me, it's kind of a little bit different some of the other guys, because I would be coming from work. Yeah. From training people, and then I'd have to get the hell out of there. Yeah. To get back to work. Maybe when the time you were in there, I had my schedule situated enough to where I didn't have to go back to train clients on Friday, because that was one of my long-time goals. Yeah. Because Friday was the best day. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. And it would fuck me up too. Yeah. I mean, in a different way. Like Monday was getting run over with a truck. Friday was just exhaustion.
Yes.
And so what are some of the things that you remember?
The one that jumps out is Louie would always be hard on everyone, but this time he was being hard on Mike Ruggiero. So he remember the thing I remember about Louie, one thing about as a young guy going to Westside, everybody has a different opinion. So like, and that opinion could change day to day, week to week within the workout. Louie could tell you to do an exercise. You start doing it and he says, why are you doing that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you're like, could you just told me to? It's like,
yeah,
well, that was 10 minutes ago. So Ruggiero and him were getting into it, and he wanted to do an arch back, like a static good morning where he had to kind of like almost pulse it.
Yeah, like an arch. Yeah, yeah. What we would call arch back good mornings back then.
And so Louie yells at me. He says, "Grab him," and I might have weighed 180, right? Skinny. And not strong, especially compared to you guys. So Louie says, grab him and shove him. And then Ruggiero's going, don't fucking touch me. Sorry, I don't know if you can cuss, but
yeah.
He says, don't effing touch me. And I'm going, oh, I got to choose one.
Yeah, yeah.
So I know Louie's going to be here in a year. I'm not sure if Ruggiero will be. So I just kept pushing him thinking he's going to rack that and kill me.
Yeah.
But stuff like that always would stand out. Or Chuck getting there early. I think you learn like what to do. Like Chuck would get there so early, and I would always try to beat him there, and I'd just jump in and he'd do his 1,000 lap pull down, abs and all that stuff. So I really enjoyed that part. And then going to the meets, I thought was fun watching you guys compete.
Were you able to pick up on the fact that, because you said that Louie would tell us to do something, but then turn right around and say, what the fuck are you doing? Like,
yes,
after doing it.
Yeah.
Did you pick on that if any of us came up with any idea or any movement that we wanted to try, we would never voice it to him. Yep. We would have to make it somehow or another his idea for him to be able to voice it back to us. Otherwise, it would never fly.
Well, the thing that's funny about lifting in general, and everybody's got it's almost like religion. You'll find whatever you want to validate whatever you think you should do. So what Louie didn't know is he would recommend these books, and I would go get them and read them. But he'd say like, "Oh, the Russians lived on hyperextensions," and then you'd read the book. It was like 2 sets of 10. Yeah, it's like I don't know if they lived on them, but I always remember too that he would leave, and then you and the other guys would kind of gather on the reverse hyper and be like, he tells us to do all these bands, but he doesn't make the Monday workout. And you get so mad because he'd be like, you need more bands, you need more of this. But then come Monday, he would like drag a sled and go home and make you get.
So he would be ready.
Right. Yes. You guys are doing good mornings. And
yes. Then the fucker would, and I say this in all respect, right? Because
sure,
big impact on my life. But when you were there, was I squatting with Louie? Because there were like subsets, right? Yeah. So we had around the same squat. So for years, it was us back to back. And he put on more. Were bands there when you first came?
Yeah, that's when they first started. I think I got there right when you guys started using them.
So he starts putting these on, and then we realized pretty quick that you can't have no tension in the bottom because we're putting them on just the way they normally would. And it just got more and more radical, as you probably experienced. It just got fucking insane. And he takes it out like on pin 4. Right? And I'm on like 13. And he's trying to tell me the band tension's the same. And there's like nothing at the bottom, and I'm fucking dying. And of course, the reason I'm dying is because my lower back is weak. Yeah. Right. And it's not because there's more band tension. So I get pissed off one day, and I take the white boxes that we used to stand on to be able to do deficit pulls, and I throw them in there. And like, oh man, you fucking do this. Yeah. And then he gets all fucking mad. He doesn't end up doing it, but I like to throw him a lot of shit, as you probably saw. Because I'm like, hey, if he's going to talk this much shit to us, I'm going to throw it right back at him.
Which I think he ultimately liked about you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope so, because I get thrown out because of all that. Nobody else is fucking doing it. Yeah. But we would try to figure out, because you see what everybody else is doing, right? But he had influence coming from people like Buddy and Mel Siff and all these other coaches that would call and have that. But we had conversations with other lifters that they would suggest things. And it would be, we'd want to implement them, but then how do you implement them, right? And it was, how do you make it his idea? Right? There's that. But then how do you implement it into the system as the system was, right? And most of the people there at that time, because most of them lasted for a long time, kind of knew the system, They may not have known the intricacies and all that kind of stuff, but they knew it. So they knew you can't just throw more shit on top. Something's going to have to come out.
Always.
Right. And if you're going to throw more shit on top, then it's going to create more recovery demand. Then, there's only so many restorative recovery methods you can have, which I think we kind of all found out over a period of time. A lot of that's just fucking worthless. Yeah. Just don't get into that state in the first place, which
100%.
We're kind of seeing now with recovery modalities that are becoming a little bit, we'll get into that later, but people don't train hard enough to need the recovery modalities. There's the first problem, but then the recovery modalities become more weighted than the actual training, which is like, what the fuck is going on with that? Where we would implement them when you were feeling like you're about to get fucked up.
And you probably were.
Then you put it in, but most of the stuff, it was the sled drags and stuff like that. And you'll have better insight on it now because you've spent 20 years. It wasn't recovery, it was work capacity.
Yeah, I think that Louie was a better, I'm probably not the guy to qualified to say this, but I think he's almost a better sport coach than powerlifting coach. Chuck came down for my last meet, started helping us every squat day. That's what he said. He was stronger with Louie, but he was a better lifter when he left. And I knew what he meant. I think that's where Louie served me really well with athletes, because a lot of his stuff is so good for anyone. If you just take, okay, this guy's beat up, let's sled drag, let's do some glute hams, reverse hypers, maybe we don't squat him. It's funny, I put some notes in because one of the things that drives me nuts now in modern coaching is these coaches don't compete in a strength sport. And a lot of times I say, if you competed, you would never do that with your athletes. Yeah. Because you know how bad it fucks you up. Like you and I know it because there's certain things, whether it's taking a max deadlift, how taxing that really is. But if you kind of dabble in it and you read about it, then you make your athletes do it, you don't even know what you're doing. But I thought Louie was the best at that. All the peripheral things, he was really into, he was curious.
I saw that when I was there, and for years I kept, because I traveled with him to do the seminars, and you would see the coaches that would be coming in. Yeah. And the ideas that he would throw out, coaches, some of them were stupid, but most of them were really solid ideas. Yeah. And I kept trying to push him into more of that, like put more content out, for the coaches. And I was unsuccessful with that. And I think later on, Winning tried to do that, and he was kind of unsuccessful. I give a lot of credit to Tom Barry, right? Because then, I don't know if it was Lou's age or whatever it was, but then it broke through. Yeah. And then it went through, because the time that we were there, it was, this stuff's never going to work for athletes because it's only good for powerlifters. A decade later, it's only good for multiply powerlifters. Yeah, right. Yeah. So then a decade later, it's only good for multiply powerlifters who use drugs. Yeah. And
which we know wasn't true.
Right? Because there were people in there that didn't use drugs.
Yeah, I was one of them.
Exactly. And that back then it was, well, this only works for the people that use drugs.
Where they'd say, I remember one time, it was funny because you looked at me and they're like, well, except Matt, because they said nobody there can bench over 405 without a shirt. And you were like, all of us do. They're like, well, except you. Yeah. You guys are all super strong. I used to argue, I think you guys would have been better without gear, because I thought you didn't get the same carryover. When we go to the meets, I would see guys in the warm-up room who I know weren't stronger than you guys, but would compete with you guys because I think they got more out of their gear.
Well, it would have helped if we used it, in training, which Chuck eventually ended up doing. So that's kind of what helped there. But the whole time I was there, the squat suit only went on. I mean, briefs are pretty much all you ever really used. And then the belt was kind of frowned upon unless it was like the last sets. Speed work, yes, for the bracing, for bench and squat. Max effort work only when you needed it. Yeah. The rest of the time. I
remember that Sean guy would hide his gear under his bodybuilding pants. Yes. You guys would bust them.
It was like, what the hell, man? Yeah. My gym bag was a belt with 2 wrist straps tied across it and 1 elbow sleeve. Yeah. And that was kind of it, and then the briefs on whatever that day that was. But when, at that time, I don't know if the carryover was because of the gear advanced. Yeah. During this whole time period. So we were slow to adapt to be able to see that there's a bigger carryover.
Well, I think like you look at Bill Crawford's guys who are clearly getting way more out of their bench shirts than you guys were.
Oh yeah.
Like what did Kenny 2 board 6 1/4 and then bench like 650?
Yes.
At a meet. That's
Kenny missed one time at one of the Arnolds, somewhere in the sixes, like 600, 625, 645. Yeah. I don't know what it was. He fucking missed it with the shirt on Saturday and benched it raw on Sunday.
Yeah.
You know, the day after that.
So you know something's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, there was a point where I think he started to figure the shirt out because he went on a series of meets in a row. I'd have to look at open powerlifting to know, but he'd come in on Wednesday because they'd be traveling on Monday coming back. It's like, hey, I just benched 700. It's like, what the fuck, you know?
Yeah.
But that was like a 50-pound PR. And then like the next month, it's 750. Yeah. And the next month, it's like, what the fuck is going on? Because you train him with the guy, right? It's like he's not gotten 100 pounds stronger.
Was that when he started going to Angelo's on the alternate week?
No, he just started really dialing in the shirt, trying to figure the shirt out. And it definitely worked. And for him, he had a short stride. He was already strong to begin with. The stuff that he was doing was ridiculous. You know, just raw on the bench. Just
absolutely.
You know, it's like you're out, then I'm out, and then they got like 5 more sets. They're still working up. Yeah. You're just like, fuck. I guess I'm just the spotter for him and Rob. You know, the rest of the day as they work up. So when did you go to Pitt then?
99, 2000-ish.
And how did that happen?
Joe Collins had got a job there, and Buddy's reading resumes, and he says, look at that, no one mentions Louie Simmons. And then Joe said, I got a guy who trains with Louie Simmons. He'd love to come out here. And that was it. Buddy brings me out. You know how Buddy is. He sits you at a table. He asks you every question about what we're doing at Westside. And then he finishes by saying, none of this means shit if you don't recruit. And this information wasn't worth anything, you know, unless you recruit, and gives a Buddy rant. Yeah. Usually filled with anger, and
well,
and then he goes out and lifts to some 80s rock or something.
Yeah, his knowledge is deep.
Yeah,
you know, so he embraced, learning from everybody.
Absolutely.
So what were some of because if you're going in there, you're probably going there with like a 90% conjugate mindset. Maybe even more.
Yeah.
How did that shift after you started learning from Buddy? Well, actually, it shifts in 2 ways, because now you're working with a group of athletes that are talented athletes, but it's still a group.
Yeah.
Right. So it's more than one person.
Yeah.
It's a group. So things have to modify because of that. And then they have other recovery demands outside of just recovering from a squat, bench, and deadlift.
I think the one that hit me big was there's a guy named Jim Sweeney, and he played 13 years for the Steelers. Buddy personally trained him. And the 2 stories I remember off that is, number one, when we're walking to the weight room, remember there's in that glass room? And Joe says, don't look at Sweeney's wife. He's like really jealous. And I'm like, who's Sweeney's wife? He goes, you'll know. And there's like some hot blonde. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Now I'm nervous that I'm going to look.
Yeah.
And then 2, Jim Sweeney's maybe 6'7", 3 something, ripped, doing close stance safety yoke bar squats with at least 5 or 6 plates, burying them for sets of 5 or whatever. And Joe said, you want to go tell him he should squat wide? I said, no. Like going. But what you start to learn is, and I didn't know if I even learned this at Pitt right away. I was pretty dogmatic, and I think we all go through that. Where like, and I was almost like a little girl. I'd like call Buddy, and it's like, Buddy or Louie, I'd say, Buddy's not using the right percentages on like. But then when you figure out later is there's so many guys who are successful, whether it's sports or even powerlifting, and you get more open minded. But at that time I was still pretty dogmatic. It took a while. I was pretty hard headed, honestly. But you start to learn, okay, how are you going to tell that guy, a 13-year NFL veteran, that he's wrong? And how can Louie tell him he's wrong? Because Louie's played 0 snaps.
Yes. Well, he would try.
Oh, absolutely. He would try.
So that would be the interesting thing with him is, when you travel somewhere and then the whole ride back, he said, these fucking coaches don't know a fucking thing about it.
Yeah.
And in some regards, I think he was right on the stance that they didn't put enough emphasis on absolute strength.
Yeah.
Right. Now you deal with somebody like you're talking about how do you extend a career?
Yeah.
Right. They can lose some absolute strength, especially at that level.
Yeah.
But that still comes back to the question of what's the minimum absolute strength that's required before they're going to lose a step and then be out of the game.
I think what I learned from Louie and then how to apply it would be, Louie was way out there. And I just said on the way up, I talked with John Perillo, and like you've heard his nutrition stuff. The pioneers are going to be so far out there. Mm-hmm. It's a tough sell to get somebody to completely go where they want you to go. So I think the medium, you start to learn how to kind of get an idea or two and gain some trust. Mm-hmm. Because you're not going to walk in as a 20-year-old kid and say, I lift with Louie Simmons and Dave Tate. I don't care. You change everything. And the guy's played 13 years in the NFL. So you have to learn how to give them a tip or two. It's almost like I always say, it's like training pro athletes like a wild animal. You got to you can't just rush them. Mm-hmm. You got to give them something they like it, they'll come back to you. Give them something else they like, they'll come back to you. If you try to bogart it and try to tell them this is right, change this, they're generally going to walk away from you.
Now, he would have been at the Bengals first, right? Because if I'm going through this timeline, because it was Pitt, then Bengals, then Pitt.
He went Pitt, then Browns, then Pitt.
Yeah, Browns, I'm sorry. So, yes, because it was Pitt to begin with, then Browns, then back to Pitt, then it was Buffalo, then it. Yeah. All right, so you went there when it was the Bengals.
Browns, yeah.
The Browns, sorry, I keep going fucking. That's because you're from Cincinnati, man. Right. So I keep going back to there. So that would be that big difference there. Because I remember when we would go up to visit, I mean, they're amazing fucking athletes. I don't care if they're having a losing season or what they are. I can't remember some of the names right now, but there were some people.
I remember Courtney Brown.
There were some of the linemen, man, they couldn't even fucking walk.
Yeah.
And let alone barely move in the weight room. And then they would put the pads on, and then you go watch them in their pregame warm-up. Yeah. It's like, where'd this come from? Well, it was always there. They're just only using it.
Yeah.
I think it's like a 17-year veteran or whatever it was. But and then some of the other ones, the natural strength is just fucking unbelievable.
It's insane.
That's where I started to kind of really grasp onto the concept of the first goal is to not get them hurt. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I see that.
Are you a gym owner struggling to build a staff that sells, leads, and sticks around? Then you can't miss this. September 18th and 19th, my friends at the Varsity House are hosting the Business of Strength Retreat at the beautiful Canopy Hotel in Scottsdale, Arizona. The theme this year is Interns to All-Stars, your complete employee development playbook designed for gym owners. You will get the same systems used at Varsity House to turn brand new interns into six-figure coaches, managers, and even partners. A 10-week intern training program, team alignment and cultural leadership strategies, sales systems that make every coach a closer, a plan to retain and reward your best people for the long haul, their proprietary on-the-job training program, workshops with other world-class gym owners, and a chance to win a $5,000 private consulting package. Plus, you'll hear from elite speakers like Mark Innes, Joe Riggio, Dan Goodman, Devin Gage, and a stacked panel of top gym owners doing this at scale. They will also have a rooftop cocktail party, which will take an already great networking experience and make it even better. They only have 50 seats available. Visit bosretreat.com to register now. Use the code ELITE250 to save $250 as a VIP listener to the Table Talk podcast.
So then what was the difference when you went from there to Pitt? Because now you're going down a whole caliber of athlete.
Well, no, I went Pitt first. Thanks, people.
Okay.
But I would say I did better with the pro guys because in college, they're yelling at the kids all the time. That's not my style. I don't want to scream at somebody if I got to push you to work. Mm-hmm. So I trained, remember a guy named TJ Hushmanzada, Bengal receiver. I trained him for a while. And then one day he was kind of half-assing it. This is back in the newspaper days when, people had newspapers. Mm-hmm. I go to one of the kids there. I go, hey, go grab that paper for TJ. And TJ goes, what do you want? I said, just grab it. And he said, look in the one ads and see if there's a job for $7 million a year to catch a football. Mm-hmm. And he just laughed. I'm like, but that's all he needed from me to go let's pick it up. I'm not going to yell at him. I'm not going to scream. So I kind of like the pro guys better, but you got to get the respect. And there's a guy named Barry Stokes. You can look him up, played for the Eagles and the Browns. He hated, that's the other thing you learn. They don't like to train.
Yeah.
We love it. We're training against our better judgment at this point, or our doctor's better judgment.
Yeah.
And they don't like to. They look at it as a pain in the ass. They are questioning if it's helping them.
Mm-hmm.
So you really got to go slow and try this. You can't just grab them and widen your stance out and loosen your belt. That's not, all the stuff Louie do. You got to kind of ease them in. And then I think when they get things that work from you and you can show some value, they come back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the approach I've always taken.
Well, with the pros, then you have to deal with they're gone during the off season.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then who knows what they're doing.
No idea. Yeah.
Which I still never really understood how anybody was able to manipulate that. Some would stay.
Yeah.
Very small percentage.
Yeah.
One of the trips Louie and I made up to the Packers, and this is when they were on their Super Bowl
Is that
run.
Kent Johnson?
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the trips we made up there was one of the earlier preseason training.
Yeah.
The number of people I saw come in and just throw checks and cash down, basically paying the penalty to not be there the whole time, blew my mind. It blew my mind. I'm like, wait a minute, right? Because I'm a fucking total meathead, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you're saying this is what we live for. Like these guys are like paying to not fucking train.
Yeah. It's insane.
Kansas, just how it is. I'm like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
Like, where's the money go? You get it? Like,
right.
It's into the penalty. But the ones that stayed, they worked hard.
Sure.
And they're still pro athletes. So all those things kind of combined made me kind of look at that. Because when I was in college, I wanted to be a strength coach, right?
Yeah.
As a lot of us kind of aspire to.
Sure.
And I kind of started to pivot away from that because I saw how it would hurt my powerlifting when I started to realize the hours.
Absolutely.
That it was going to take because they're there from 5 a.m. till 9 p.m. Little did I know as a personal trainer, you do the same fucking thing, but I didn't have that foresight, to be able to know that. I guess as a trainer, you can control your schedule a little bit differently than what that was. At what point did you realize that the personal side, the one-to-one side, the personal training is where you wanted to go instead of strength and conditioning?
I think 3 things. Number one, at that time, I knew we were probably going to get fired.
Comes with the territory.
And at that time, I think Buddy's the best strength coach in America, any sport.
Yes.
It's my opinion. But,
I would have that same opinion.
His next stop was Buffalo.
I think he was the second strength coach to ever be hired.
Yeah, that's right. Jackie Sherrill. Yeah. But he went, even Buddy, as good as he is, his first job was in Buffalo. And I think then he started that gym for his stepson.
Mm-hmm.
And then he got back with Pitt, and I think then he got the Cardinals,
or
maybe somewhere in that line. But just to show you how all these guys think it's all like easy, it's not.
No, he went from the Browns to Buffalo.
Yeah, and not the Bills.
No,
University.
Yeah, yes, and that was his love of coaching, though.
Yeah.
Right. And I think during that time period, he also realized because the personal training center, he did not want to do that.
No,
he had to be on turf and rubber.
Yeah, yeah, he did not like that. But I think then I just decided, and I think I never wanted a job. I mean, I heard Mark Bell say that once. It's true. I mean, it's the funniest thing. Everybody asks me. I've been really lucky. I've been very successful in these gyms, and I've never had a business plan. Now I know how to write them. My business plan was like almost powerlifting. It's like, well, if I train people from 5 to 11 and they don't come back till 3, I can get some food, and I can like map my. It was all in my head. Trainer's been with me forever. We always laugh. Our whole day was training people in the morning, but all we were doing is like, what do you want to do for max effort? What are we going to do today? And our clients probably thought we were having like these in-depth conversations. It was all like, do you want to do good mornings? Do you want to do a low box squat?
Yeah.
I think not enough coaches now are into a strength sport. All my coaches I require to compete. I don't care. You can do bodybuilding, CrossFit, strongman, power. I prefer powerlifting, and I always tell guys this, 3 things that really bother me in modern strength coaching, they all dump on powerlifting. So they'll say like, well, and I agree, Ed Cohen wouldn't beat Usain Bolt in a 100-meter dash. But every one of us, which include you, how many times have you taken a high school kid and raised their squat and they run faster?
Every time.
Every time. So I agree there's a point of diminishing returns on that. I'm not trying.
Yeah, but most people are never going to see that.
They'll never get there.
You mentioned one guy at the Browns, right?
Yeah, right.
One guy. And even with that, You know, if that goes from that 560 for reps to 455 for reps, he's probably not playing anymore.
Exactly. And then you got, I always say this, like, you know what we do at the end of the day, Dave? We solve people's problems with a barbell at the end of the day. So a soccer mom comes in and says, hey, my body's wrecked. I used to have a nice ass. Now I had 3 kids and my ass sags. What are we going to do? You're going to squat her. Mm-hmm. You're going to do, you know, like, you're going to do variations. And I love these people. It's like, why don't you use a barbell? Oh, what do? Why goblet squat? So you still squat. Mm-hmm. I don't care.
Yeah.
And they bang on powerlifting. And it drives me nuts because, and I've heard a lot of coaches say this, part of why I reached out to Matt to come on. I hear them say stuff like, well, it's easy to get strong. Is it? Because you're not strong. Mm-hmm. You've never been strong. And you've never even, and it's all the people, it's like, yeah, I took a kid from 225 for 5 on deadlift to like 315. Like, that's not hard. You're in grade 1. You haven't even got to high school.
Yeah.
And what you learn on the way, and I can't tell you how many guys have joined our gym and they're like, I'm going to beat your numbers. I say, I hope you do. And then what happens? You get hurt, plateau, whatever. And then that's when you start to really figure it out, because that first year or 2 is nothing. Mm-hmm. And so these coaches run around and say, getting strong is easy. And I work on this. And my counter to them always is, okay, you work on explosive strength and speed. What's your 40? What's your 10-meter dash? What's your vert? What's your broad jump? All these guys run around and they do this stuff, but they don't even measure it. Powerlifting is accountability. Mm-hmm. If I say, Dave, I know how to get strong, you're going to say, how strong are you? How strong are the guys you coach? There's accountability. Nowadays, these guys run around in like this, I call it's unaccountable. It's like, I do speed work. What's your 40? Well, I haven't timed it. Then you don't know. You have no accountability. What's your vert? I don't know. I just do a lot of plyometrics. Well, who cares? So do my kids. They play on the playground.
Yeah.
So are they a strength coach now?
Yeah.
You know, it drives me crazy. And you have to be a master of these movements, because that's what we teach day in, day out. And I'm telling you, I teach it to John Jones, and my trainers teach it to 80-year-old clients. How do you squat, bench, and deadlift? And if you're not immersed in that, because you're always going to pull clients up, right? They're never going to reach you. Like when you were training people privately, they were never going to squat 935.
Yeah.
But if you were a 10 out of 10 seriousness, your client's best bet is probably an 8 out of 10, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're an 8 out of 10, that means your client's going to be a 6 out of 10. If you're a 6 out of 10, your client's going to be a 4 out of 10. And I think part of the respect I've gotten over the years, particularly like in MMA, is they can tell I don't fight, but I fight that barbell like I'll fight it till I die. And I think there's some level of respect you gain with that these strength coaches don't have.
Well, there's a secondary component too, because in all the years that I had clients, I didn't have any set program, right? You can just say it's conjugate.
Yeah.
But I had metrics that I tracked, mm-hmm. right? And there were 4 levels. It was like cheetah, lion, panther, and whatever. There are 4 different type of cats, because I wanted to move from one cat to the next cat and get a reward sent to their house. All that kind of shit.
That's a great idea.
And then what I put in there was everything I could find through ACSM or ACE. Some of it was stupid, like a sit and reach, the sit up, push up. You have all these things in there, but then I would have a box squat, because then I knew what the depth was every single time. Mm-hmm. I'd have a bench press. Then I'd have some kind of deadlift, maybe a pin 1, pin 2, something like that. But they were always in there, because they're trackable metrics. And those metrics, all these other ones like chin-ups, like take a gen pop that hasn't trained in 10 years and test them on a chin-up. Fucking good luck with that. You're using a machine, which, you know, the correspondence of that actually working to them doing one could be a very long time. Yeah. So a lot of these other things got to be regressed. Yeah. You know, that makes them feel terrible.
Right.
Like you can't do a normal push-up, so here, we got to do it this way.
Yeah.
You know, so they just came in, so they should be rewarded. Meanwhile, you're making them feel like shit.
Right.
And then the other metrics that would be on there, but they're not my control, would be body fat, mm-hmm. you know, circumferences, and the other stupid shit that we'd have to do. But those are all detrimental to their ego too. Yeah. Especially the first day they come in, they already know they're fat, you know, so if you're going to test all this. But through them, the ones they got the most excited about were the squat, bench, and deadlift, right? And now when those things would start to stagnate or whatever, I knew how to fix it.
Because you've done it.
Because I've done it, and I've seen every sticking point there is to overcome. And with them, it's very easy to be able to overcome that. So in a way, it becomes your functional movement guide. Yeah. for that. And I always kind of go back to the squat because I'm biased as fuck. That anytime you've ever had a surgery, the first thing that they have you do is do a sit to stand from your bed to stand up. That is the very first thing that any physical therapist teaches you to do, right? That's a box squat, right? So it's just so ingrained that. But to your point, knowing how to fix those technical flaws are going to be more ingrained because you've had to do it.
Yeah.
But you also understand what it's like to not push hard on it, when to not push hard on it.
Absolutely.
When it just may be you being a puss about the whole thing and you got to push hard, or maybe you were too aroused and then that impacted that next session because you're learning all these things, which most you probably won't need with those other clients, but they're tools that you have to have because you have to regulate their intensity.
Absolutely.
They don't know because they've not done it. Right. So let's think about that. The client doesn't know because they've not done it, but they need a coach to be able to help teach them the effort and the intensity.
Yes.
And they've not done it.
Well, think of it.
So if they've not done it, how can they teach that?
They can't. And here's the other thing. Two other things that drive me absolutely insane is, like, for example, they'll say like, well, Chuck Vogel couldn't play in the NFL. Does that discount strength training? Like, guess what? There's 1,200 people all in, not just players. 1,200 people are employed in the NFL right now. So a lot of people couldn't play. So guess what? Neither could your functional guy. Neither could like your yoga instructor. So stop. I hate those comparisons. It's less than 1%. So yes, you're right. But who would be more likely to like win in a backyard football game? Chuck in his prime, or some like functional guy on a foot ladder?
Well, the interesting thing with that is they're using the outliers.
Yeah.
And I've only been involved in maybe one of these type of conversations with somebody in the past 5 years. But I'll just go to open powerlifting.
Yeah.
Then I'll open that up. Then I'll scroll down, after you get through the outliers.
Yeah.
Into like the middle section or even the bottom section.
Yeah.
And say, well, what do you think if it's a 220? Like, what do you think of this 220 lifter? Do you think like a 365 pound squat would be a power lifter?
Yeah.
Well, that right there would put them ranked here.
Exactly.
Right. So they're not looking at the whole, they're looking at one top section of a sport, like a Chuck Vogel pull or the 800 pound squatter, but not realizing how rare those really are.
Well, for sure.
Because when you go look at the number of competitors, obviously they're the top 10% because there's 90% underneath them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, this idea that because like you or I couldn't play in the NFL, our training's invalid. No, maybe our genetics are invalid.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't fear a guy who's like doing a Bosu ball handstand, right? Like that wouldn't make me nervous. The other thing that drives me nuts is I'll see people teach the lifts horribly, like awful. I'm sure you've seen it. And then they'll say, well, we're not power lifters. And it's like, well, I'm not a chef, but I don't put tinfoil in the microwave. Like, then don't teach it. Like you don't see me teach Olympic lifts. There's certain things I don't teach. So if you're going to teach it, you have an obligation to that client to teach it correctly.
You know what's interesting with that though? If they have that client doing a push-up and their back is swayed and they just look like total shit, they're going to regress it. If they wanted to have them do for some dumb fucking reason, like a full sit-up, and they couldn't have them do that, they'd have them do crunches.
Right.
So they regress the chin up. They can't do that. So they're going to find some way to be able to do them. They regress everything else.
Right. Exactly.
But they won't regress the squat, the bench, or the deadlift.
It's an odd, it's so weird. And it's an odd phenomenon I've seen in the last like 3 to 4 years where they just, anything strength related gets crapped on. And it's like, that's what we do. You're not like, I'm telling you, I've seen guys, and you've seen guys like John Jones pull 600 like that. He's stronger than you think. So, and maybe that's just, he's got it naturally and it was easy to get him there, but it's still, and this is the other thing I can't stand. Like we have a speed program and we'll use, this is the other thing I learned from Louie. You got to look at under every rock, right? That was the old thing. $1 million under a rock, right? But we do have this all. So we have overspeed treadmills. We have resisted treadmills. We use everything in our power. And somebody will say like, well, Usain Bolt didn't do that. And I'll say, is your kid Usain Bolt? Because if you don't have it genetically, then you got to build it. And so I'll look at athletes and say like, yeah, you got no glutes. So we're going to do exercise for your glutes. Yes. I'm sure Usain Bolt probably had glutes when he was 6. I was just at a track meet yesterday. I saw a 7-year-old. He looked like he was 12. It was incredible. It's just so, if you don't have that naturally, then you have to create it somehow. And so I don't, like, that's the other thing. I think they'll take these outliers and say, like, well, Herschel Walker didn't lift. Okay. Well, if you're Herschel Walker, best of luck to you. But you don't look like Herschel Walker to me. Maybe, Well,
they also discount all the athletes that do.
Well, correct. Yeah. It's just funny to me. It's like, okay, are you Herschel Walker? Well, you're not. I would get him to that squat rack.
Yeah.
But
so when you started the personal training, how did you go about that? Because you had to relocate back.
Yeah, I had to learn.
Client one, like N equals N1. Oh, how do you find that?
You gotta be hungry, man. I see people all the time. Here's what I tell people all the time: stop posting. I mean, I think you should post some, and there are some people who do it really successfully, but I always went business to business. I made friends with chiropractors. I made friends with tanning salons, anywhere I thought I could get it in. And I would say, hey, I'll train your staff for free. Let me hang out here and solicit. And you got to learn to sell. That's another thing. And people should read books. I got that from you. You had the E-Myth. Do you remember this? And you showed me that book in like 98. And I read that book. So it was funny. You and Chuck and Louie would always be talking. I would just kind of listen. And then it was like, Dave would be talking with the E-Myth book. And I go, I better go buy that book.
Yeah, it's still it's a business.
Yeah. So I was like, I try not to chime in too much, but I was like always listening. But you got to learn you got to learn about sales. You got to learn how to get to people's motivation. I think you have to create value in whatever you're doing. And I know that's a corny saying, but what I mean by that is if people generally like mitigate their health or minimalize it, they'll say like, I'm a little overweight. Yeah, my back's a little tight, but it's not bad. You have to kind of open their eyes to, no, you're obese and your back's really bad and you don't play with your kids because of it and you're getting less work done and you're exhausted all the time. Because people aren't going to give you $500 a month if it's a small problem. So if you want $500 a month, you got to show them your problems are worse than you thought. You have more problems than you thought, and I'm your guy to fix it.
So you were in a different situation than I was because I was always in a club, right? So the club is its own feeder system.
Absolutely.
Right. So I have people right there to talk to build the relationships with, which they still didn't walk up and say, I want to sign up.
No.
I had to keep a notebook with everybody's name. And thankfully, the club I was at did laundry for them. So I could put the name, the shirt, so I could remember who the person was.
So smart.
Then every time they come in, you engage more.
Yes.
To the point where they're coming in. It's like, hey, Julie, how Jamie doing his soccer game this past weekend? Because I already knew from the past conversation. Then it gets to that point where, hey, look, I just had somebody cancel. I got, is there something you want to work on? And kind of work that route. You're in a whole nother world here, man.
Yeah.
Right? Because you got to go out and do a seminar and then have that seminar be some kind of lead magnet that then has to make a huge jump to actually come to a location.
The irony of this, and I didn't think about it, you just said this. I think I was one of the first boutique gyms, all personal training. Our first one was 800 square feet. We got it to 9. We had ended up 9 stores at about 3,000 square feet. Now come full circle, I got a 16,000 square foot membership gym, 24-hour access. Half of it's PT, so we divide it down the middle. Because I used to hate as a gym, if you show up and you're getting ready to do a set and somebody's like, oh, my client's going to be using that. It's like, well, it's not a hotel. You don't book the machine for Thursday. The leg press is taken. But so we did that. But now we have 24-hour access. I've kind of flipped it because to your point, I was always in these small boutique gyms where I had to go find the customers. And then once you get them, you can, it's, I always say the more you do, the more you do. Because if you get like, 1 referral a month per customer, you have 1 client, you're going to get 12. But if you can bump that to 10, 20.
Well, yeah, I mean, at a certain point, it becomes the referral game instead of the recruitment game.
Exactly.
And it should, because your results should be able to stage those referrals.
I think so.
So staying back in that time, how did you go about teaching your trainers how to get referrals? Because they can come straight up and say the shitty way, hey, do you know somebody that wants to come in and train? Did you have processes that you would teach them?
Yes. I have an ebook on how to do that I give to all my trainers. But the biggest thing I try to do, I'd say you got to be better listeners, because as I'm talking to let's say I'm training like 3 housewives and you're listening, they're like, oh, my friend Judy, da da da. And then one day you're going to say, where does Judy work out? Oh, she doesn't really work out. Why don't you bring her in? But if you don't listen, that's one thing I notice with most people. The most boring, I always tell my trainers, the most boring topic you will discuss is you. You know, most trainers come in, it's like, oh man, my girlfriend, she was being this. And yeah, my dog, he's you know, he was cute today. And it's like me. And you're getting no information. So how could you get a referral? I always tell my, you know, the best thing I told my clients or trainers, do a book report. If you have a client, I should be able to go and say, okay, tell me about this person. And I should know where they were born, how they met their spouse, are they married, do they have kids, how did they get into the field they're in? You need to know them. And then you know where to go to get the referrals and just even what motivates them. If you don't take the time to know people, you're kind of going to be lost.
Yeah, big time. It's, I was always kind of taught birds of a feather flock together, right? So every client has potential clients that are their friends.
Yeah.
Right? You just have to be able to listen. And it's hard. I get it. It's part of the reason why I stopped being a personal trainer.
Sure.
It's hard, right? Because you got to listen to a lot of shit you really don't care about. But at the same time, you got to realize they don't care about your shit either. So if all you're doing is talking about your shit, they really don't care the same way you don't care. But once you build that rapport and they just would say something like, 4th of July, you know, they went to a gathering or whatever it was. And that kind of like opens the door. And you know, who were you? I would somehow or another get them to be able to say, you know, who were you hanging out with? Who were you with? And they'd say name. Then I would come out and be almost too aggressive.
Yeah.
Hey, if you know, I was hanging out with John. Hey, do you mind contacting John for me to see if he'd be interested in a personal training session? Now I know for a fact they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
I know that already going in. But I also know that when they come back in and I say to them, hey, did you have a chance to get a hold of John? They're going to say no. But then I can say, hey, do you mind if I reach out to him and use your name? Then now I take the pressure off of them.
Yeah.
And then, hey, John, I was just talking to Joe and he said, da, da, da. And so it's that kind of shit, you know, building different processes to be able to get the referrals to come in. And
I think the other thing too is any contact outside of the gym is like worth 5 inside, right? So if you go to coffee or dinner or catch a kid's football game or soccer game, whatever, they are always really, and it's funny because I would do it naturally, especially like a high school kid. I want to see how they do. You put a lot of effort into it. And then parents would be like, oh, that was so great. You came to my kid's game. And I'm like, and then the other parents are like, oh, you're Johnny's trainer? Oh, we need to come see you. But I always say, get their number. The biggest mistakes I see people make, number one, you got to ask, you got to get their info and don't give them a yes or no question. So you don't say like, hey, Dave, you want to work out? You're going to go, no. Oh, you say like, Dave, you like mornings or evenings? And then you can see people's brain working like, fuck, this guy's got, okay. I'm a morning guy. Great. You like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday? They're like, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Great. How early is early for you? And you can just see they're almost like, all right, this guy's got me. But if you give them yes or no questions, you might get no. And you're kind of stuck.
How did you go about still in these startup days? Because you have to manage the trainers, but then you still have your own clients as well. And then your own clients can range from Gen Pop to a Division I athlete. Yeah. Right. So you're wearing multiple hats at one time, but at the same time, you have to train with different personality. You have to train different avatars. Yes. You know, and flip from one to the next really quick.
In this regard, I do treat everybody the same to an extent in that I mean, it's funny because I have everybody train pretty hard, but you're right in terms of how they feel special. You got to make everybody feel special, but equal. So like there's certain things like if it's like an older lady, I might walk her to her car after every workout. Just like, you know, if it's an older single mom, something like that, I might take you to your car. If it's you know, like we used to get the newspaper. I used to give one guy, I love to get the newspaper. I'd say, hey, I'm done with it. Here's your paper. Whatever it is, you just got to make sure they feel special. I think I tell my trainers, there's so many choices now. You got the online coaches, which I don't know why that's a choice, but I think it's the dumbest one I've heard. But you got all these gyms and all these personal trainers out there. It's a privilege. You got to feel like, hey, these guys can make a lot of choices, and $500 a month is still a decent amount of money. It's not as much as it used to be, but it's still a lot of money. And so you got to like really appreciate them and then do whatever you can. I like even like outside touches, like I'll text them later, like, man, your squat looked great today. Or just showing them the progress they're making. Like, hey, when you started, you couldn't do a glute ham raise. Now you're doing 3 sets of 20. Great job. And the thing I always caution trainers is it's very analogous to like dating. And I tell everybody, nobody woke up one day and broke up with their spouse or their girlfriend or their boyfriend. It happened over time. And by the time your client comes and says like, hey, one, they'll never tell you the truth. They'll say, oh my gosh, we got so much going on. Joe's in club soccer and Mindy's doing this. Really, that there was something else and you didn't know it. And if you're not in constant communication, you got to have your finger on it. I always tell my trainers, I don't care if you lose a client and you tell me early and you give me a chance to mitigate it. But if you lose a client and you had no idea it was coming, that's a bigger issue. I mean, I'd rather you come to me and say, I got to be honest, I overslept one session I was overbooked. I had too many people. I didn't give her a lot of attention or didn't give him a lot of attention, whatever. And then at least you knew if clients are leaving you out of the blue, that's the worst thing that could happen. And you have no idea why.
How did you go about managing when to pay yourself and when to put it back in the business?
Well, you get to pay yourself. No,
well, it's the truth. I mean, you got to figure it out.
No, for sure. I think, I took actually a basic accounting course in college. I think you can do it online now. I think a lot of these things you can learn on even YouTube, but just like accrual versus concurrent accounting or like, for example, if you're a trainer who sells sessions, you sell 50 sessions and you're like, man, I got a check for $2,500. Now you have a liability right now. You're in the hole. And that's fine because you got to get, but you need to like be aware of how to account for that. I know a lot of trainers have screwed themselves on that because they're like, look at all this money I made and they blow it.
Yep.
So I would just say, just like you do at home, get a budget. So you got your rent, you got your equipment. I tell people all the time, you should lease your equipment now because equipment, like everything else, has gone up in price. You can lease it, you can write it off. Assuming you have good credit. I mean, that's very common. And people like you guys can refer people, I'm sure, to get people to finance it. But then you have to have you have to work backwards. And I tell everybody, don't give yourself a job. That's probably the biggest thing I say, like work backwards because this is the other one. So many trainers think they're building something and you're building nothing. And I hate to say that to you guys because I know some of these guys and it's going to like hurt feelings of guys I know, but you have to think, how would I sell this business? What do I have? And if that's not your goal, then you got to start putting it away because if you're a trainer, you probably don't have a 401k, you probably don't have health insurance. So you'll be relying on Social Security. That's it. But I just always worked backwards and I didn't do it well. To answer your question more directly, I didn't do it well in the first part of my career. And I remember thinking like, I can't be 70 and working 70 hours a week, 100 hours a week. That's not going to fly. So then I started to look like, okay, what do I need to make? And then take myself out of it. Because I know so many trainers like, I made 60 grand last year. I go, no, because you were the trainer. Your gym made nothing. Because if you had to hire somebody to replace you, you got nothing. And I think that's a long answer and it's probably individual for everybody. But I would just say you have to work backwards. It's just like lifting. Back to lifting. You have to say, all right, if you're at a 600 pound deadlift and you get to 800, all right, what's the gap? What do I have to do in these next 3 or 4 years? And in the business is no different. Like with our gym right now, we have 600 members in the first 4 months. Our rent's roughly 15 grand a month, all in, cam, utilities, the whole nine. So I tell my guys, like, we have to get really to 1,000 members to make this thing worthwhile. But and then you say like, okay, what's the cost to acquire a member? We have a marketing girl. I always say, if you can't do it well, I'd prefer you don't do it till you can afford somebody who does do it well. But so we found somebody who does a really good job with our social media. And then you got to like, look at like, and I always say this too, it's got to be equal for everybody because it's like a bar stool. You got the owner, you got the employees, you got the customers. All three have to feel value. So I tell my trainers all the time, sometimes like, hey, this is an investment to me. I'm not going to put $500,000 in this gym to break even. But they got to work for a wage they feel is fair.
Yeah.
And then the customer has to feel like this is a really good value for me. I'm going to continue. So I'm proud of like, we have 7 trainers right now. 5 of them make over 6 figures. 2 of them are newer. So they all do well. I think our prices are very competitive. But again, working kind of backwards, early on, you're going to work for free or pay to work, but you have to have a vision of where you're going. And it's just like anything, you're laying a foundation. So I don't know how well I answered that, but that's kind of...
No, I mean, the only part I would say would be left out is as soon as you can start to put in extra cash to be able to ride the downturns.
Yeah.
You know, you need to be able to do that because there are downturns.
Absolutely.
There's more, I would say in business, it's more bad than good. You know, it's as far as the issues that you're going to have to deal with.
For sure.
And you just have to be okay with that, right? And just realize that the struggle just gets worse each year. You just get better at handling the struggles that used to bother you 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's well said.
Now they're not a big deal, but there's going to be other ones that are going to take their place.
Or I'll give you a good advice. I tell every young entrepreneur, and I think you did this too, get 3 or 4 guys or girls that you really respect, almost like an informal board of directors to kind of help you. And then the other thing I say is think of the 3 worst things that could happen to your business, write them down, and then have a plan for it because it will happen.
Mm-hmm. 100%. It'd be a SWOT analysis.
Yeah. And then the thing I cannot stand with young entrepreneurs, and this could be even people in general, this is probably not when you bring me on this podcast, but like I'll see people all the time, they're like, oh, everything happens at once. And I'm poor me. And it goes, you just kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
All these things, as soon as you can take care of something, take care of it. Don't procrastinate, because that's when, oh, my car broke down and this happened. And it's like, yeah, but all these things were happening and you just ignored it.
Yeah.
So it didn't just all happen at once. It's been brewing, but you choose to ignore it, and that's fine. But that's the outcome you're going to get. Mm-hmm. And I see so many people in business, oh, my business went under, but this happened, this happens. Like, but you should have known that was coming. Mm-hmm. At least 2 of the 3 things.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, you get one curveball, but the curveball is exasperated because you didn't take care of the other 3 things on your plate that you could have taken care of 6 months ago or a year ago. And as soon as you see a problem, you got to take care of it. No matter what, early, it's like cancer. Go, get it out. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a bad trainer, bad employee, bad customer, bad equipment. You know, there's an old saying, everybody goes, why do you buy elite stuff? I say, buy nice or buy twice. Anytime I've skimmed, I end up rebuying it. So it's like, if a machine's broken, fix it. If it's broken twice, get rid of it and eat it. But you got to be on top of these things, because when you let it linger, that's when you have trouble.
What was the decision to go into the place that you're in now?
I think it's getting harder with young trainers. I think work ethic is less, and I wanted a second revenue stream. So I had a trainer, he's going to hear this, he won't like it, but he was making $120,000 a year with full benefits, 401k, health insurance, working 30 hours a week. And he came and he goes, I'm burnt out. I go, you're burnt out? And I just thought in that moment, I said, okay. And I said, I need to have a second revenue stream. That was that simple, because the work ethic's not what it used to be.
So that 30 hours, that's 30 billable hours?
He worked 30 hours. We trained multiple people at once. He was working 30 to 38 hours a week, and making total comp was probably close to $140,000.
Okay.
And I'm going like, bro, that's as good as I can do. I think that's pretty good. Cincinnati, Ohio. I mean, we're not in Manhattan.
Well, yeah. I mean, you still have margins to cover. I mean, this is what I almost think that everybody at some point in time should start their own business, you know, just to understand what the hell a profit and loss sheet looks like, you know, to know what goes into running a business.
Absolutely.
And then they need to understand the difference between a gross margin and a net margin.
Big
and
difference.
the number of people that don't know that blows my mind. And I kind of get it, you know, because if they're just being paid by somebody, they're getting, you know, paid off all that. But the company they're working for may be operating on a single digit net, you know, which doesn't create a lot of, you know, room, you know, to be able to do a whole lot of shit, you know, from that. But then on the other end of that, just 1 or 2 higher percentages on the gross can make a huge difference when it comes down to that net.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I've learned that the hard way. And the other thing I tell owners of businesses, be careful with your bonuses and your initial pay. We're known for paying really well, which we do, but the problem is no one ever goes backwards. So if you pay big early, it's like, oh, that was good. What do I get next year? So I always tell like guys who call me for advice, I'll say, think of a long term, because these guys are going to want raises. They're going to want bonuses. And if you start too high, you're going to kill yourself. Matter of fact, it was a competitor of ours. My buddy was mad I helped him, but he was losing money. But I said, you're overpaying your trainers by like a lot. So he's like, I don't get it. The more I do, the more I lose. I said, yeah, you're like, because he didn't understand exactly what you said, gross margin versus net. So I said, the more training you sell, the quicker you're going to be out of business. You got to redo it. But he didn't understand gross versus net. You're 100% right.
And with your own training, because you still competed after leaving Westside, what were some of the things that you changed?
I always say this to people. I wish I'd met Louie 10 years later, because I think it was one that was interesting is I didn't really know the sport like I should have. Like, I didn't understand. I'd see like a guy like Eric Tomlin and I'd think like, oh, he's weak. Well, he's raw. And it's not to like, I respect every lifter. But there is a difference between squatting in a belt and a canvas suit.
Oh yeah. But
I would just sit there and but all I knew was you guys. So it's like 500-pound squat. That's terrible. Angela's squatting like anything. But it's like, so then you kind of go out in the world, and then I met more people and I got less, I saw more people with different methods and different ways to be successful. And I remember like seeing like anywhere I could go, I would go. Like Donnie Thompson, I was interested in his body tempering. I went. I said, can I come stay with you for a week? Stayed at his place for a week. I'm always like real eager to, I'm not smart enough maybe to decipher things on my own. So I have to like have it hammered in my head. But I go see the Lillibridges. I go see Ed Cohen, work with Stan quite a bit. And I think the biggest difference was everything. Here's where I've kind of come to now. And I've had a lot of success. I've had 5 guys recently I've trained that over 2,000 raw total. 2 of them are legit drug-free and no knee wraps, just a belt.
I'm always looking for ways to improve my training business's life, but none of that matters if my sleep is trash. If your sleep sucks, your recovery and performance is compromised. Sleep is the ultimate recovery tool, and temperature plays a massive role in this. This is where the Chili Pad comes in. It's a water-based, temperature-controlled mattress topper that fits any bed. You can set the temperature from 55 degrees to 115 degrees and even schedule changes throughout the night. It also has dual zone control, so I can stay cool while my wife stays warm. Visit www.sleepme/tabletalk to get 20% off your Chili Pad with code TABLETALK. This special offer is available for Table Talk listeners and only for a limited time. Order it today with free shipping and try it out for 30 days. You can return it for free if you don't like it with their Sleep Me trial. Visit www.sleepme/tabletalk and see why cold sleep is your ultimate ally in performance and recovery.
I find that beginners overtrain, but they don't train hard enough. And I'll get to that in a second. So like they're the guys who train 6 days a week, 20, 30 sets of body part, and they never get any results because they don't train hard.
Okay.
They're like the guys who are like, I did 4 sets of this, I did 5 sets of that. And I'm like, you did 0.
So the volume's too high and the intensity's too low.
Yeah.
Intensity and effort's too low.
I find with the top guys I deal with, and I'm getting a lot more guys like pro bodybuilders or even like high-level powerlifters who are struggling. Have you ever met anybody at Westside that didn't train hard enough?
No.
What was of all the top guys you've ever met, it's usually an injury is what kills you. Every time. So what we've actually started doing is rotating our days. So all my top guys are on a 3-day a week, but like, let's say 1 week might be like Monday's a speed bench, or some guys I don't think need speed bench. So it's going to be accessories. Then Wednesday would be like a max effort deadlift. Friday would be like an AMRAP bench, like a top set. And then the next Monday would be like a speed squat. Wednesday would be a max effort bench. Friday would be like maybe a top set on deadlifts from a deficit or something. But we've spaced out the training and my guys are blowing up. I'm talking like one guy went from 805 to 860 on the pole. We had an average increase of 70 pounds on high level guys. And this is all, people say the gear, these guys are all raw. And guys going from like 405 to 485 on bench. But what hit me finally, and especially, I told you about my John Jones, fell off a treadmill and ripped my shoulder off. Even for me, I just noticed it was like tweaking a hamstring. And I learned a lot from Chuck. When Chuck came back and helped us, Chuck started saying, I just kept pulling hamstrings at the end. I don't know if you remember that. And it just kind of hit me one day, like nobody's ever telling me I didn't train hard enough. So it's like, we got to, and you can't, guys like Chuck or some of the guys that like, there's a guy named Robert Knudsen, totals 2,100 raw. You'll never pull them back. So it's like, just space it out. Cause I can't, I'll never get you guys to pull back. So it's like, okay, go hard as you want, but we're going to space this out so that you're still not sore when you walk into deadlift from your last squat session. And I've seen guys try to like mitigate it all different ways. And they'll say like, well, I'm just doing accessories. I'm like, yeah, but the top guys, their accessories are hard, you know? So I've spaced them out and the results have been like amazing.
With all the people that you've learned from, and let's just keep this to powerlifting because it's easy for people to understand because it's maximizing 3 main lifts. Right? Yeah,
for sure.
And you get into sport conditioning, you know, there's more metrics that get involved, but to the point that I'm going to have you try to make here, it's going to be more comprehensible this way. With all these different philosophies, I guess, or ways of going about getting stronger with all the people that you've talked through, there's a lot of differences. You know, Bridge spacing out every other week, you know, Westside, you know, max effort dynamic, Ed Cohn more linear. So you've seen people across the full gamblet outside of maybe HIIT training, but you know what that is kind of, because Perlo in a way was kind of a disciple of that. Out of all those different disciplines, what are the things that are consistent amongst all of them?
Oh, I think you got to have great technique or good technique. And there's variances. It's funny because somebody say like, well, KK's bent over at the deadlift. I'm like, but his basic technique, like you got to have decent technique. I would say great technique, ideally.
Always working on it.
I think picking numbers right. I don't care what program. I see guys all the time, Dave, and they'll say like, I should be able to do this. It's like, it's not what you should do. And I take a lot of stuff from Wendler. He's smart. Like where he says 85%. I tell guys, whatever your 5 rep max is, that should be your training max because you'll never miss it. And he's particularly in the linear stuff. I think conjugate's really good for general pop because they come in, they took a 2-week vacation or what, you know. That's actually great. But for like some of these lifters, they come in and they're like, I think I squat 500. It's like, you don't squat 500. Well, I did once. Okay, but that's not today. One day, there was a time in my life I could dunk a basketball. I couldn't touch the rim now. So should I base like jump training off me dunking? You know, it's not the same. So Pete, you have to be very realistic. You got to have an ego, but you got to know how to like be smart about it. Because I cannot tell you how many guys come in. I'm saying like, what do you pull? And they're like, oh, I pull 750. And I'll say, great. We'll do this for 5 or something. And they can't get 1 or they get 2, or then this is where Louie drives me nuts. Cause they'll see some guy like can't get a triple. Like he'll say, I'll bench 5 and 405, you know, he misses after 2 reps. He's like, well, I'm more of a speed strength guy. I'm like, would you stop?
Yeah.
You don't have that much speed.
Yeah.
You know, like your 405 didn't like fly off your chest. But that's what I'd say. Picking the right numbers, great technique. Those actually would be probably the 2 things.
And consistency.
And then the other thing is everybody did the same thing differently. So if I talk to Ed, he said he spent countless, like he was like high bar pause squats, stiff leg beltless, stiff leg deadlifts, def from a deficit. He loved the bent rows. He loves his close grip and behind the necks. Stan talked a lot about his bodybuilding stuff, helped his powerlifting. We all have to find the secondary exercises. I think Louie did it just way more rapidly. You know, every week you're switching, switch. But continue. My point is I think there's going to be a law of diminishing returns on just doing the squat, bench, and deadlift. You also have to, at some point, deload. And some guys do that through the exercises they choose, right? So it's like Dan Green talked about a lot, like his front squats. Well, you're not going to be able to load as much on a front squat.
Yeah.
So he kind of mitigated himself with exercises. Some guys, you know, take time off, which that wouldn't be for me. I like to train too much. But I watch these. I think the biggest thing if I was going to try to condense it, I try to tell people, it's like a business. KPIs, what's moving your lift? That's the hardest one. I see so many people doing stuff because somebody told them to do it. And I'll say like, it's like, well, you got to do speed works with bands. I'll say, why? I'm not saying I'm agnostic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't care anymore. Like I used to be a Louie disciple.
Yeah.
I don't care. But I say like, you have to have something that says this went here and it drove this lift.
Yeah.
And I always make my guys write down like, okay, here's your deadlift. Write down what drives it. Now for some guys, it's like, I like straight sets of deadlifts. Great, do it. But you got to prove it and you got to be honest with yourself. Not even with me. I don't care. It's your lift. But like if close grips make your bench go, then do close grips. If you think it's wide grips, if you think it's incline dumbbell press, whatever it is, but you have to be accountable to it to say, well, and then you have to have the discipline to say, I love doing dumbbell incline. Like I'll give you one. I always hear people say shoulder press builds the bench. I've seen a lot of guys push their shoulder press over 300 and their bench goes nowhere. And then you have to say, you might like shoulder pressing, but if your goal is to bench more, what's the cost of that shoulder press? Because it's not driving your bench. Your shoulder press went up 50 pounds. We had one guy, his shoulder press went from 260 to 320. Or so it's 60 pounds. Standing, no leg drive. His bench went up 0. So I said, now you're just doing this because you like to do it. And that's fine, because if that's your choice. But you can't tell me it's for your bench.
Yeah, you just deprioritize it.
Exactly.
You know, it can still stay in there. One thing I wanted to circle back to is with the percentages when you're talking about when learned, kind of mitigating all those. And with the max effort work, because you were there, right? So you saw all this. Now, the max effort exercises did change very frequently. So there was a lot of exercise variance there, right? But the goal was just to strain, right? So that's kind of what that was. But I think the exercise variance, and I'll come back to that here with the dynamic day in a second, gets very misunderstood, you know, because you were there during a time period where the foundation was really being set on what the Westside method was for powerlifting, right? Caveat, because it's different for whether or not it's sport. And now, as we would do that max effort exercise, how many times was it actually a true 100%? Now, when you think about it, right, you hit something and then you'd be like, oh, fuck, man. You know, I don't know, you know, if I can put a dime on per side, you know, then you're like, it's out. Or maybe you just say, fuck it and try it anyhow. And then it's in there. But the number of times in my experience that it was absolutely 100% to where one more pound on there would crush you was very, very little.
No.
A lot of times it was you broke your PR by 5 pounds, you're done. Right?
Yeah.
Very fucking rare. So that gets misunderstood. Max effort method needs to be this 100%. So people that take more jumps than what they really should, right? Or they just don't cap it when they've already hit the PR, because if that's the metric that's driving the main lift and it's going up, is the training not doing what it's like, to validate your point, is the training not doing what it's supposed to do? Yeah. Now, if it's 50 pounds under for whatever reason, gut check, you know, are you sleeping? Like, what the fuck is wrong? You know, so something can be wrong here. Now, with that exercise variation getting kind of blown out of proportion, if you looked at, because you were there Monday and Fridays, if you looked at the dynamic day, what did we really do outside of odd things here and there? It was a dynamic squat, glute ham raises, reverse hypers, and pull down abs. There might have been like 3 other movements that got thrown in just for shits and giggles. For like the 8 years I was fucking there. We just changed the way the glute ham raise was done. Yeah. Either loaded, not loaded, incline, not incline. You know, you just changed it around as soon as you couldn't make progress, but it was still the fucking glute ham raise. Reverse hyper, long strap, short strap, high reps, low reps. Now, granted, there wasn't a whole lot of fucking options either, but that might have been a good thing, because this is one of the things that I like to rant about is box squats are bad for your low back. Okay, so then the reverse hypers must have kept our low back healthy. No, reverse hypers don't help lower back problems. Yeah. Well, then the box squats weren't fucking our back up.
Exactly.
Because I know of one person that I trained with during that time period that had to have any type of lower back surgery, and that was years later because they didn't train at all for 5 or 6 years. Right. And started training. How many lower back issues? Yeah. Like none. I didn't see any. Upper back, different story, but yeah. But very, very few, right? And never. But the one with the dynamic squat really didn't hit me until like 8 years ago, when somebody was asking, like, well, what did you actually really do? right? Because there's what's in the article. And it's like, well, so box squat went in waves, went from 5 weeks to 3, chains got put in, bands got fucking ridiculous, glute ham raises, hold on abs, reverse hypers, and then you're like, fucking pull through? Yeah, I mean, then you got to start like stretching it out, to be able to see.
Which I don't think I saw. I think I saw maybe Joe McCoy do pull throughs once in 3 years of going up there. I agree. It was all glute ham, reverse hyper, standing abs, sled pulls, McDonald's.
Yeah.
McDonald's golf.
That was a big one in there. Where it's, when I look for those consistencies, I see the same thing that you see. The other thing that I see, and this depends more upon how close to their, I hate the word genetic potential, but I don't know how else to say it. How close one gets to their genetic potential. Yeah. Right. Because it's a real thing. I mean, there is going to be some kind of outlier with that. The closer they get there, their ability to auto-regulate, the training. And Westside, while it was kind of like Louie loved people that would run their head through a wall, there was still this auto-regulation going in. Like, dude, look, you about fucking, your ball sack blew off on the last one. It's under the reverse hyper. You probably want to shut it down and not try the next one. Yeah. Right. And so that was kind of ingrained to be able to learn that. And I think all other lifters kind of learn that.
Not to cut you, that's a huge misconception. There's all these stories, and I'll watch like Westside versus the World or whatever. And people tell these stories. I'm like, I don't think it was that. I didn't see any of that. I mean, you guys like all lifted hard. Like, I think you said this once in an interview, like you were a trainer, Chuck worked at the prison, Kenny had like an IT job. Like this idea that it was like all hooligans and chaos was kind of overstated.
Yeah. It may have changed after. I don't know because I wasn't there. And after Louie passed, I went down this big rabbit hole to try to talk to all these guys to be able to see like what changed. Yeah. Right. Because the base is still the base. Yeah. I thought the base is still there, but what changed because they got stronger. Right. So I think what changed was a better regulation of that real heavy shit. To where if it was going to be like a circa max type of thing within the Monday, it came down to like accessory work. Yeah. More implementation of the gear and stuff like that. Where I was still using this shit with the clients that I was training, the max effort work just looked way different because the technique was the breakdown, not the load.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah.
So it's obviously you're not going to have a gen pop person, deadlift that looks like absolute hell. As soon as it breaks down, like that's it. It's good, and it's more opportunity for them to get better.
Absolutely.
So that just chips up all the time. But it was still, now the compensatory side, the speed work, that was a little bit trickier because athletes inherently kind of know rate of force. Yeah. Right. Somebody that never played sports, they just know stand up.
What's funny, this is where I got excited. I used to be all in on whatever Louie said. And then I just, I didn't even read, you and Wendler write an article, do speed squats and then good mornings. I'm like, Louie, you can't do good mornings after speed squat. He's like, and he'd of course riff on it. But then you get to around and you're like, there's a lot of strong guys who don't do everything Louie says or whoever says. But with that being said, I've seen a lot with jumping in short sprints with some of the people, because let's say, yes, if Chuck squats 1,000 and he's doing 500 in blue bands, he can get after it. If you got a client squatting 135, what am I going to do? Put a band and a broomstick? So I started doing things like we had this girl, she was 57, 120 pound nurse. And like most women, she was like the rep queen. She could squat 185 for 8 and then get buried with 205. And she was going to do a meet and she only weighed 120, but she ended up pulling 300, squatting 235, mother of 4, drug free. But what I changed, I had her start jumping and doing short sprints. Cause it's I got to get her to learn how to turn it on. And even if I gave her a light weight with a band, she didn't know how to but if I made her box jump, if you don't accelerate, you're going to hit your knees on that box. So that's a good example of okay, dynamic work the way Louie wants it wasn't going to work with her. Yeah. But I found and I made her sprint, resisted sprints. And she's like, I hate this. I'm like, you got to learn how to fire.
Yeah. Well, at that age, they need to not lose it.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's one motor ability that I believe, is developed very young. Not developed, but
it is.
The maximum potential is developed at a young age. Right. But then as we get older, it's kind of one of the first things to lose.
Absolutely.
And that was one of the counters against the dynamic effort method, for a long time, is we can't really, I remember JM even saying this, you can't really increase, how fast you can move that. And my counter was, yeah, but you can stop it from decreasing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So let's just say that that's right.
Yeah.
That you can't do that. Let's just table that. And then now let's look at this as just technical acuity. Now you got 10 sets to do, one or two perfect reps to where after 3 or 4, people are mentally going to check out. Now they're going to do 8 bad reps, 2 good reps. So 80% of the set was technically inefficient, which you would never do with an athlete on a field doing a sports skill.
Right.
Because as soon as the technique, or a fighter, right? It's as soon as any of the technique starts to break down, stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like a golden rule in every sport except powerlifting.
Yeah.
Right?
Fair.
It is.
Right.
And why is it? Because A, you can get hurt, but B, you're going to reinforce bad patterns.
Totally agree.
So, but the plyometric type of stuff with the aging population, you've implemented that with success, right? Because it is, like you said, that was one of the struggles that I had there. Even if I put them on a box and put a little bit of band tension on it, I could get a little bit, right? But I was probably getting actually more from that was more stability because they were bracing because the band was pulling them down.
Yeah. I mean, think about like some of the women I've trained, when they start off, you get them stronger, but like they're still not even close in terms of, I've had like a girl can pull like say 250, rep out 205 for 20. Now your best pull is what, 735? Yeah. That would be like you doing 605 for 20. It never happened.
Why? How did you, because this is a good one, because this happened probably the same time that you were training there, is the percentage things always kind of rubbed me the wrong way because I came from a linear thing, right? Any of those charts never corresponded to me because I was more explosive than I was strong. So it never really worked. It's like, I'm supposed to do 5, but I can do 2. But I do weigh 100 pounds more than what this dumbass fucking scale says. And I had a soccer player that I was training, and her technique was solid. Yeah. And I had her max out on the squat, and it was, I don't know what it was, say 150 pounds. Yeah. It might have been probably more, 200 pounds. And it was solid. There was a little technical breakdown, but it was solid. So then I had her do 85%, do an AMRAP. It was like fucking 23 reps, right? Yeah. For a week, I'm thinking, if I did 85%, of what I think my raw is, there's no fucking way.
You might get 3 or maybe.
Exactly.
Maybe.
So then I'm like, well, how in the fuck does anybody use percentages when you're dealing with different populations?
Yeah, I think that's...
So that's kind of where you were going. So how do you work with that?
They're guidelines. They're 100% guidelines. So it depends on their goals. So like we get a lot of the women who just want to look good, so I don't care. Right? So I always tell them, like the people who just want to look good, you should try to add, like for the guys, I'll say if you do 225 for 10 and you want to look better, do 315 for 10, which you and I know doesn't necessarily correlate to a 405 or whatever. But if you don't care, I don't care. So it's your goals, not mine. So I generally keep those people in 6 to 12 ranges anyway. And then the women, I'd say 6 to 20. Because if you can put, like that girl who pulls, 205 for 20, if she can get that to 245 for 20, her ass will look better, right? I mean, that's her goal. She wants a better butt. So it's like, great, then that's fine. Now, if you want to enter a powerlifting meet, that's where the challenge comes, because now it's like, you got to learn how to, like, especially the deadlift, everybody pulls that first one horribly. But I always think with beginners, they're used to the bar moving quick. So the minute it gets heavy on the first rep, particularly with no eccentric load, it freaks them out. That's why they do better with reps. They almost got to get 5 to 10 reps to like get there. And that's fine. If your goal is just to look better and feel good, I'm okay with that. If your goal is to lift a 1 rep max, now we got to kind of start to adjust and say, okay, maybe we need some more singles, sub-max singles to feel it. That's when I think bands are helpful, even on a max effort, to teach them to like, I always tell people, like, if you had I'd say, because you're a big guy, I'd say, hey, if you had to tackle Dave, you wouldn't walk up to him and feel it. Yeah. You got to go. And you still might not do it, but at least you got to have a chance, you got to do it. That's what people, I think, with Gen Pop, that's what they don't have for singles. I mean, I watched a girl belt squat the other day, a weight that would have like given a good squatter trouble. And she got like 30 reps. I called her, her sister-in-law is the one who referred to us. I'm like, your sister-in-law is insane, but she can just keep grinding. But if you put 50 more pounds on it, she'd have got zero.
When you started working with, it's probably happened before you started working with the fighters, when you're starting to deal with a bigger array of motor abilities that have to be developed, now you have to go down the rabbit hole of which motor ability is precedent, which one matters the most. Strength still has to be incorporated, but it's going to become more phasic.
I think the fun part about all this is to your point, I think you have to be really on it. Like what's driving things, because like to your point as a powerlifter, like you can't do a chuck routine. I can't have John Jones go in 45 minutes early for his weight session and do 400 lat pull downs and 100 sit-ups and drag a sled and then lift for an hour. I get 2 days a week, and I would basically be in charge of like, okay, what are we going to do? And I kind of did a linear with him where I just like the first week of this Stipe camp, I said, let's just see your bench. I told you off camera, I said, he didn't want to bench. I said, you got to bench. Not because it's how you lift. I just said, if you can't bench, how are you going to fight? And he was worried because he had come off a torn pec. So I think he got 185 for 15 his first bench. I just said, just do 185. Let's see what you can get. By the end of camp, he had done 265 for 10 in the 8-week camp. But it was just, I said, hey, you got to do, we kind of went with like almost like a linear basic program. It was like, you only get 2 days a week. So you're going to do bench, shoulder press, chin ups, and squats. That's it. Because to your point, you got to jog. We got to push prowlers. And then you got your MMA training, which is insanely hard. And so that's what we did. But the challenge that I like about it is you have to be really on it. Because if you're just a lifter, and I don't mean to, I'm just a lifter.
No, I get it.
You can go in and squat, and then you might do like a belt squat or whatever you think. You can miss a couple because I don't have to squat for 10 days or 7 days or whatever your routine recalls. But with a fighter, I can't overtrain him. So I was pretty happy with what we did. He got real strong. Like I said, 180. But again, that's another thing. Do I need to test his 1 rep max? I get 8 weeks to the fight or 10 weeks at the time. I think like, I'm not going to worry about your 1 rep max. We'll see what you do 185 for. And then he'd always say like, am I doing good? I said, yeah, you're measurably better.
Yeah.
And that comes back to what I say in the beginning, all these coaches, they drive me nuts because they diminish the importance of strength training and there's no accountability to their training. So everything I do, I measure. I don't do a sprint that's not timed. Like that's one thing I'm big on. If you do, like, let's say I got a sprinter. If you hit a top speed that day, we're done with the sprints. And I've had people say like, I thought we were doing 6 of these. I'm like, what was your job? And they're like, I don't know. I said, your job was to get faster. You just ran 2/10 faster. Let's go. Get to the jumps. And then if we jump and we're supposed to do 4 sets of 5, but I measure every jump. The minute I see your jumps going down a little bit, it's like, we're done.
Dave Tate here from elitefts to talk to you about bands. We've been a supplier of bands for almost 2 decades now. So I've known my way around the band landscape. When I'm talking about bands, I'm talking about floss bands, long bands, short bands, bands you can use for resistance training, mobility training, body weight training, and flossing. One of our most popular bands, or actually our most popular bands, are the long bands. The long bands are typically used the most with squats, bench presses. Our floss bands are bands that you wrap around the joint to be able to help with mobility, circulation. And the short bands are designed for shorter range movements, bench press, deadlifts, and a lot of times people will use them with resistance machines to help accommodate the strength resistance curve. Head over to elitefts.com and look for bands in the toolbar or blowout menu.
They're like, I thought we had 4 sets. I said, yeah, but you're dropping. So now we're just doing endurance training. That's not what we're here for. And then 1 top set of box squat or 1 top set of whatever we're doing, maybe 2. But it's like, get out, man, because you got more to recover from than we do. And it's actually made me a better for my own lifting, because then I started evaluating like how much of this stuff is helping. You know how it is.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I'm going to go drag the sled or do this or do that. I'm going to do more upper back. And it's like, would I be better off going home and eating a steak and like resting? How much is this helping? It actually might be hurting me.
Yeah.
Go home.
And more times than not, it probably is.
And that's where I come back to with strength.
Well, caveat, as long as the effort's being applied in what the main things are.
because that's coming full circle. That's why, like with the top lifters I've worked with, it's usually pulling them back. I've never looked at somebody and said, oh, you don't do enough.
Yeah.
It's usually like, I think you're done.
Now, with the trainers that you've had that have no competitive strength sport experience, then you have them do the actual competitions or whatever it is. What are the changes that you see?
They become better trainers.
In what ways?
Because you become better at the skill. You're a better teacher of those lifts. You also learn, I always say this, like you'll pull down, we have a guy who bodybuilds, competitive bodybuilder. We have one bikini girl who works for us. So imagine if a overweight housewife comes in and you've gotten down to 3% on stage and she says, I'd kill to lose 20 pounds. You're like, that's nothing. We had a guy named Jason Harbin, who's my head trainer, has been with us forever. Drug-free, raw guy. He went from 625 to 700 all the way up to 720. Then I thought he broke his back. It was kind of like a Louie story. He couldn't get out of bed. When he would get to the gym, he'd have to like push himself out of the car. I was really concerned for him. He went on to squat 760 and 780 all raw. And I tell people all the time, his back was as bad as yours was, but he got back to squatting 780. I watch a lot of these PTs and these coaches. They're not therapists. They just tell you to stop doing stuff. He solved the problem. But if you just have a bad back and you're like, hey, I just want to play golf again, that's like a layup. Mm-hmm. He got back to putting 50 more pounds on his back. And he was a good squatter. 720 and 780 is good. That's your job. I look at that's my job. Like I got this shoulder that Jones ripped off. It's my job to get back to a 400-pound bench. And I don't have a rotator cuff. Mm-hmm. So there's times I go, I don't even know if I want to do this right now. Like we were squatting the other day and we were talking about getting under a straight bar. I'm just going like, what am I even doing? Everybody I trained was 28 years old. Mm-hmm. Like I'll be 47 this year. I'm like, what am I doing? But I'm doing my job. And that's what a lot of these strength coaches don't get. And I'm not saying you got to tear your body to pieces, but when you get to a point as you're competing, as you know all too well, everybody starts out like, oh, I'll do this. I'm just going to I'll add 50 this month. I'll add 50. And then they hit a plateau. And every time this happens, I'll say, now we'll see how smart you are. Mm-hmm. Now we'll figure it out. And that's, I think, the value, but it's your job. I can't say it enough. That's your job.
Yeah. I would agree that the only pivot that I personally had to make to that is it's not the competing, because I have the competing, but there is a measurable big goal that's set each year to be able to happen sometime during Q4. Because I'm in retail things, I got to be able to move things. Yeah. But the thing with the competing, that when I was still trying to do these things with set dates, it fucked me up even more. Yeah. Right. Because you start to wear down a little bit and it's like, well, I can deload and then I got to push here to be able to hit this set date. But when I gave myself the freedom to move the date, that's cool. I can move it, 3 weeks back, or things are going really well. Let's try to peak and hit it now. Yeah. So it comes a little bit closer. That creates a measurable anchor.
Yes.
Which at the beginning of the year, when I lay it out, it's kind of like, fuck, man, do I really want to do this? Because it's not going to be easy. Mm-hmm. Right. But then that anchor becomes that target. Like, fuck, if I want to be able to do that, my conditioning's fucked up. So I need to get the conditioning set here first, because without that, I'm not going to have the base, to be able to recover from what I need to do here. So then it ends up planning out that whole year training with that flexibility to be able to, because that target's there. Yep. And then you continue to learn from all that, more and more each time, to where the last few years, it's kind of just repeating the same goal, just at a lower body weight. I'm going to do the same thing, 10 pounds less, same thing, 10 pounds less, and just keep chipping it down. And I don't know how, because I've been this way since I was 12. Like if I didn't have that, I wouldn't even fucking train.
Yeah. Well, but why are you so sought after? Why do you think you're so sought after as a strength advisor or a conditioning coach?
No fucking idea.
I don't, because you've lived with it. You've never quit, and you're not the greatest ever, right?
Nope.
But why are people still reaching out to you to this day? Because you've given everything to it, so you have the answers.
Yeah. Well, I made a lot of mistakes. Way more mistakes.
That's all part of it, though.
Yeah, and the quitting thing's a weird thing, because I was raised to not quit.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of things that I still continue to do that I probably should have quit, but I won't fucking quit.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a net positive, but sometimes I wonder, you know, because of all that. But it carries over, right? And you have mentalities that it's a weird thing with athletes that you'll work with and just strength sports in general. There's distinct different personalities.
Yeah.
Like some people you'll put on, like I can't stand the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
Right. I just can't. That's why conjugate works so well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it was different. There's a lot of uncertainty. Like you come in on Monday, it's like, well, what are we doing? We're sitting there eating fucking McDonald's for half an hour trying to figure out what fucking exercise we're going to do.
Right. Yeah.
Right. It was like, how did you lay it out? Like we fucking never did.
Never did.
The only thing would be like, well, we did deadlifts last week. We only do that like once every 6 or 8 weeks.
Yeah.
This is not that. And, but some people have to have that certainty.
Yeah.
You know, where it's got to kind of be that same thing. And you can.
Eddie's that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be a good example. So it has to be laid out, you know, in that linear fashion to get the greatest buy-in.
Yeah. That's well said.
Right. And that's where it kind of all boils down to. Does the athlete buy in? You know, does the coach,
well said.
Does the coach buy into their own bullshit?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because then it's a weird, the field's changed obviously over the past few years, or not past few years, but past decades, where there were like grand poobahs of each bias.
Yeah.
Like Louie is the conjugate guy, Dr. Ken Leisner's the hit guy.
Yeah.
You know, Charlie Francis is, you know, the speed guy. And, you know, and I always kind of knew if I went to those people,
mm-hmm.
then I know that it's biased. But what can I learn from their bias to be able to apply?
Absolutely.
You know, or even the seminars that I would go to that I can apply to myself, but even to my clients as well, because that's different. You know that. I mean, because you go from your own training session to training Gen Pop, there's 2 different fucking worlds.
2 worlds.
But there's a lot of correlation. But if you become like part of that cult, and then you shut off, you put the blinders on, then you're not learning from all those other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes problematic too, where with a lot of the coaches I see coming up today, it's the opposite. It's like they're trying to learn from they're not, it's almost better to buy into a cult than what they're doing now, which I hate to say.
I agree.
You know, but it is, because if you buy into just one of those cults, but you stay with it long enough to see where the shortfalls are,
mm-hmm.
then the shortfalls are not 100% of it. No matter what the discipline, it's never going to be 100% of it. The shortfalls might be 30% of it, but you got 70% you figured out.
Yeah.
When I would consult with Louie, with the strength coaches, we'd use a dry erase board or table, and the conversation would always, this after Louie left, that I would have with him is like, what have you found that worked?
Yeah.
And then just lay all that shit out. Then you'll find one gap. Right. And a lot of times I didn't even know the answer to that gap.
But you found the gap.
It's like, here's a gap. Maybe you need to find the mobility guy, you know, or a speed guy or whatever it is, but don't erase the whole fucking table.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's what a lot of them were doing, is they just erase the whole table and then put in new philosophy.
No, I mean, like when I came to Jones, and he's got a guy named Jordan Chavez, does a lot of his strength and conditioning. He's great. And he's got a guy named Lawrence who does his cardio stuff. And I even said, I go, what do you want me? You got like 10 coaches. But it was more just to organize it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would basically make sure that they weren't, you know, like, hey, you're doing squats, that's fine. But, you know, he's got jujitsu tomorrow. Like you can't, or he's got.
You may have 2 people doing the same thing too.
Yeah. So I'm like, you guys, I would just kind of organize it. And I think that's where I've had success. But that comes back to, I think, powerlifting. You know, the other thing I always hear that drives me nuts, you can see it's bothered me because I've brought it up like 10 times. I'll hear guys say, there's a guy who's spoke at one of your seminars. I won't say who, but one time he said to me, he goes, powerlifting's so one-dimensional. I go, well, so is the 100-meter dash. So what's like, yeah, it is, but it's a highly sought-after trait. So is speed. So is jumping. Like, so is the best miler. So it's they belittle it. But what all these, when you compete, it's accountability. And I keep coming back to that because where it's helped me with these fighters is say like, okay, like Henry Cejudo doesn't want to touch a barbell, hates it, like does not want to touch it. So it's like, okay, how am I going to get him? And I use the Tiger Belt squat exclusively with him. Jones loves to power lift, so we let him lift. But I still have gotten really good at saying like, okay, how can I get the most out of you? Hit your goals in the least amount of work. Because I get that you guys train all week. And so that's the advantage I have that I think other coaches don't. And the coaches that compete have that advantage.
Now, on the flip side of that, and this would probably be more your high school kids, how do you get them to work, to put in more effort?
Then you can kind of yell at them. I mean, those are the kids where it's like, if the parents are cool, it's like, get to work. But there's things I like we have an overspeed treadmill. And I think measuring things, I mean, part of what made, I think, Westside so entertaining and the buy-in that you talk about is max effort, right? So it's like, all right, what are we going to do today? Pin 3. I mean, Louie always tells a story when you guys dragged him in off, quit dragging that sled. That's fun because it's a competition. We create a lot of competition. So whether it's our overspeed treadmill, our resisted treadmill, the lifting, jumps, we measure every jump you do. So it's like, he just got 26 holding 12-pound dumbbells. Oh, I'm going to get 27. You create that competition. That's your buy-in.
Well, it's kind of hard to not go hard on an overspeed treadmill.
That's the beauty of it.
So it's going to force that.
Yeah.
How have you implemented that? I mean, how do you go about, I don't want to say periodization, but how do you go about progressions?
Yeah, with a beginner, it's just like anything. There's a little bit, probably in the 80% range, 85%, just teaching them how to use it. Over time, you can build that up. And then when they get more advanced, and I don't know if you find this, when people get more advanced, they actually have to do less in a weird way. Like Usain Bolt running a 100-meter dash is different than, a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah, there's more recruitment.
Yeah, so the better they get, the higher the intensity, the less the volume. That's basically what we do.
It's the same thing in powerlifting.
Absolutely.
It's one-dimensional.
Yeah, so it's so easy to pull 800 and bench 500 and all these. It's like all the geeks. It's just funny to me. I shouldn't call them geek, but just I don't mind if you have a counter. If you're like, hey, I think lifting's stupid, and look at my 40-inch vert. I go, shit, okay, that's pretty cool. But none of these guys have an answer. They're not out running 40s. They're not out dunking basketballs. They just don't want accountability. Lift, that's the beauty of strength sports or accountability. If you're in Olympic lifting, strongman, that all counts.
Well, when you break it all down, it becomes more basic than people want to make it up to be.
Sure.
And we've seen this all over the years. People will extract a method, if it's overspeed eccentrics or if it's, take any method of the hundreds that are out there, then that becomes the new method, which becomes the new program, and it's all based upon strip sets or whatever the fuck it is. And that happens less today because I think it gets countered way faster.
I'll give you another one. You're asking about competing. You're 100% right on that. The lifting, you were asking like, how does it help my trainers? I always tell a story about Stan. When Stan comes to visit, he has a suitcase full of food every time. He never misses a meal. He's like meticulous. He went to sell that cooler. Do you remember that when he's on Shark Tank? I've never seen Stan with a cooler in my life. I spent a lot of time with Stan. He didn't sell the cooler. And I tell my guys all the time, you can't sit there and you're out eating, McDonald's and Arby's and then give a lecture to somebody about dieting because it just comes through. You know what I mean? And if you just talk about lifting, but you're not really into it, there's an authenticity that it's not tangible, but there's something that you can tell when somebody's serious. And it's like, okay, I'll listen to them. And I think that's the other thing about competing, or at least holding yourself accountable to some lifting.
Yeah.
Remember at the end, I think I told you once, Louie was bringing his runners down to run on my overspeed treadmill. And it was to the end. And he was like, my guys don't listen to me anymore. And I said, because you're not lifting with them. Because at least when he was getting you to do stuff, he's in there doing it. And you might have hated it, but it's like, well, he's doing it. But when somebody's sitting there barking at you, they don't care.
There was a difference. I don't want to say with everybody, because Chuck's Chuck and, Joe McCoy is Joe McCoy. But when Kenny called Louie out, because he was retired when I first came in. Yeah. And then Louie came back, there was a difference. Absolutely. Right? Because for me personally, it pissed me the fuck off, right? Because he got stronger. Yeah. Then he got as strong as me. And then body weight wise, he's stronger than me. And it's like, what the fuck? This guy. And so I went hard, after his ass for that, because I was pissed for one thing, right? Because it bothered me, but it raised everybody else, right? Because there's a certain degree of credibility, that comes with that. And then walking the walk and doing it, and then he's more fucked up than everybody else that's in there. So you can't complain about something being fucked up. Yeah. You just can't, Like, how can you?
If he's doing it, yeah.
Fucking guy's draining blood out of his kneecap before you're squatting. Like, I'm going to complain. My fucking quad hurts. You know what?
Yeah, you can't.
You just can't.
No.
You know, and it had a huge difference because of that. And I can see where it's coming down on the other end, but there's probably other variables that came as well, where one thing I personally, I'll say it again, personally felt when we went from 800 square foot to 2,000 square foot.
Yeah,
it was a big difference.
Yeah.
Because when we'd have the squat group, you know, 2 people squatting, the other ones are running. Even if the other ones are doing reverse hypers, they're only like from here to that bench rack away, you know, so they're over for every set.
Lost some intimacy.
Yeah. So yeah.
A weird word, but yeah.
Yeah. And now they're way over by that front door. It's like, hey, motherfuckers, you know, can you get over here? You know, so some of that, but it's probably more than that, just because 10, 12 years in one place and then a new place. Me personally, I'm probably like, fuck this new place.
Yeah.
I like the old place, you know, that kind of thing too.
100%.
That plays into that. With Perillo, interesting here is I had a stint in college where I was bodybuilding, and my roommate at the time we kind of got into the Perillo 10,000 calorie, basically fiber and MCT oil diet. And so we came up and ended up, first time I ever belt squatted was with John and Vince Rinaldi. And yeah, I mean,
he hooks you into the rock climbing harness.
Oh man, no, it was a rod.
Like you had like a harness with the weight hangs between your legs.
And it was a death set, puking my brains out. But that stint didn't last that long, but the training was completely different. The diet was way different. And you've known John off and on, you know, and now you're co-owner of Perillo Performance. So how did you first meet him, and when did you meet him?
I met him in like 2005, and he had his place, and we actually leased his building where Gearman is now. That was all a gym. So he had nobody in there. And we said, we'll lease it from you. So we ran a business out of there. And just like all these guys, I mean, John's way is John's way. Mm-hmm. Anybody else is wrong. Well, that goes to what I was talking about.
Absolutely. And that's kind of how my philosophy was back then. Mm-hmm. It's like, how's this different? Well, the intensity and the effort's way harder.
Oh, way harder.
Right?
Hardest workouts ever done.
Oh, yeah. But then the volume wasn't decreasing. It was like, oh, like what the fuck, right? Either your work capacity has to meet the volume. Yeah.
That's the deal I finally made with him as I got older. I said, we do accessories there. So we do the belt squat, his leg press. And I finally said, like, you get one set, you know, you do like the force negatives and the guy's picking you up. And I was like, you get one set per exercise. Because to your point about John, where I wore out with him is, he's great, but it would like, you would do a weight you'd never done for 10 on a belt squat, and you just did 20. He'd be like, all right, let's add more. And I'm like, no.
Yeah,
finally, I'm like, dude, I'm not going to make it.
Yeah. But on the flip side of that.
And then he would say, well, you're not eating enough. I'm like, I'm at 6,000 calories. Yeah. You're not eating enough.
On the flip side of that, he was training bodybuilders predominantly, right? So they didn't have to worry about how that was going to negatively impact their ability to display force with a 1 rep max.
Yes, exactly. Well, and this is why I come back to like I actually use that belt squat. If my leg press, I love to leg press. My squats didn't go up when I leg pressed, so I gave them up. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by accountability. You have to decide, like, if you want to leg press just because you like to leg press, that's fine, because none of us are really getting paid for this. But if you want to be accountable to getting stronger, that's why we don't really leg press. But we do that belt squat. Mm-hmm. Not maybe all the reps he wants.
Yeah.
But I liked it because it made me use my hips more. And I thought, because I started early with you guys with the briefs early on the box, I thought my hips actually got underdeveloped. I wish I had used no briefs for a while.
Yeah, I can see that, because
my back got strong. My back got really strong. To your point about no back issues. But I had to get my hips stronger when I went to raw. When I went like multiply to single ply, then went to raw, it's like my hips are actually weak.
Did you have to bring your stance in too?
Yes.
Yeah. How much?
About a foot each side. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which was wild, because I mean, it was humbling. But it's just different. And I agree with, you said this once, I heard on a podcast, like you talked about the feedback loop. So it wasn't all weakness. There was just some feedback loops, and Go do that. But I thought the belt squat John's way really taught me how to use my glutes in the squat.
So how did this co-ownership, is it with Pro Level Performance?
It's with a guy named Jeff Hyatt. So he's one of our clients, and he loved the products and I love the products. And then John just kind of abruptly shut it down. Couldn't find a buyer. So we were down a couple months. And I said, John, like, you're not selling them anymore? He goes, no, we're done. So then we bought it back and started manufacturing, which is
And how long ago was that?
about a year ago.
And how's that going so far? I mean, that's a whole different domain now.
It's a lot harder than you think. It's getting there, but it's harder than you think. It's starting to pick up now, though. But yeah, it's hard. And now with the regulations, so we're changing our bars, no dyes, no artificial sweeteners. I mean, so a lot of John's, the dye thing is out of, I mean, people do not want it. So the bars, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, it's just, use, we like beetroot powder instead of red dye 40. We use monk fruit instead of sucralose, but there's a lot of changes coming.
Are the labeling regulations still in? Because I remember years ago when DeFranco did his bar, the labeling was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
The shit he had to go through.
It's very hard. Yeah, there's a lot going on. It's not easy. The person say it.
Yeah.
I wish I could give better reports.
Yeah.
I mean, they're great products. I think the bars, and like I say this more as a customer than an owner, the bars are phenomenal. We make one now that's 330 calories. We made it for Stan, actually. It's called the World's Strongest Bar. It's got 330 calories, 33 grams of protein. It's a great in a pinch. I mean, I eat them on the way up here. So I think supplements are just that. I mean, people, there's no magic one. But I do think a good bar or a powder, like I'm driving back to Cincinnati, I'll smash something.
So with that bar, what's the fats in there? Is it kind of like a meal replacement?
Yeah, it's only 5 grams of fat.
Let me take that back. I don't want to say meal replacement.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. I'll
usually eat 2 of them.
Yeah.
And it's all MCT oil for our fats. It's only 5 grams of fat. They're pretty tasty. And they, like I said, I mean, at the end of the day, I think I'm not a dieting expert. I wouldn't say I've done it a long time. I've helped a lot of people, but if like you want to get ready for a bodybuilding show, I'm not your guy.
Yeah.
But it is a calorie equation. If you're trying to get bigger and stronger, you got to eat.
Well, with his original products, he was developing those so they could be used for people as they were prepping for a show.
Oh, here's the thing about like John, Louie, all the guys I kind of gravitate towards, to your point. I mean, John's like a cult or whatever you want to call it. But he's all in, and he's not like, he believes it. Like we have something called PB for MCT, mix defatted peanut flour with MCT oil, makes an incredible peanut butter. And he will tell you, you can eat that all the way up to the show. And he had I think he had 12 Mr. Olympias or something. He had a pretty good resume. Yeah. And he said, no, my guys did this. And I believe him. I do believe him. I mean, I've seen some of his bodybuilders are phenomenal, but he pushes those calories. Mm-hmm. And it works. It's worked with my Gen Pop. I mean, it's to your point. I don't have anybody in Gen Pop eating 10,000 calories a day.
No, but a lot of those I mean, when it's fibrous calories,
they're coming out.
Yeah, it's coming out. Right. So it was interesting while that lasted. It was a lot of fucking vegetables, a lot of broccoli, like a whole head of fucking broccoli. I mean, it was fun. It was kind of. Thank God I was in college. Yeah. I was able to eat when I wanted to eat and had jobs where I could be able to eat, because that's pretty much all you did was eat shit, go to class, come back, eat shit, go to class, train.
Yeah. What's amazing about John and Louie is you can just tell, or guys like that, I'm sure Ernie Francis was in the same way, any of them, they're so single-minded. Like if you said that to John, he'd look at you like, what's class? Like, you got to eat.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean class, a job? No, you're eating.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying what you're watching, make sure to take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe.
And then remember, Louie would get all those guys to come up. He tried to get me to live in Columbus. I'm like, what? He goes, just be like a bouncer at the strip club. I'm like, I'm not going to be a bouncer at a strip club. Like, nothing wrong if that's what people are, but like,
it was a lot.
It was they were just so single-minded. It's like everything should be, which is a good thing. That's like to your point.
Yeah. I was that way for a long time, but I always had some kind of backup plan rolling in the background. Yeah. I'm not saying I'm like priority 1's training, this like priority 10. There's like nothing in between. So there was that, but there at least was that. Yeah. Where some of the other people I've trained with since I started, that was all it really was. And then when that falls out, and it will.
Yeah, absolutely.
It will. Eventually it will. It does for everybody. At one point we all end up dying, so it all ends up. But
And by the way, like we were talking about accountability and you're like, well, I don't compete anymore. Well, no, should you? You're almost 60.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the 28-year-olds who are like, well, I don't need it. You're not, like one time you said in the gym, and I don't know if you remember this. Like I said, I always just listen to you guys. You said, I think you said to Kenny, everybody talks about like, that was like when you started to hear like the 4-hour work week and work smarter, not harder. And you say, these people need to learn how to work before they know how to work smarter. And I couldn't agree with you more. And that's what I mean about some of these young strength coaches. They're trying to be the guru on the hill before they're 20.
That shit drove me fucking crazy back then because like, how do you know what 4 hours?
Yeah, exactly. You don't know.
I mean, I don't know any fucking business owner that works less than 60 hours. And if you add in how often they think about the business when they're not in the business, you're at 80 to 100 hours minimum, and I'm old, right? So I got biased mindsets and all this other shit where if you wanted to have a job, and this is the advice that I used to give, strength coaches and personal trainers that I still think they should follow, but they won't, is, if you know of a facility in your town and you don't want to leave your town and you want to work there, then build your credentials enough to be able to go there and work for free. Right? And then work for free to show that you can build the clients to actually pay for yourself. And then once you can actually pay for yourself, then you can ask for the job. And 100% of the time, you will get the job.
Absolutely.
100% of the time, because now it's no risk. You're already paying for yourself.
So I'm very fortunate. My gym allows me to kind of come and go as I please now. I don't really train anybody. I'll help out. I jump in. I still like to train people, but I don't have like a set. I got to be there this time. And one of a girl who used to work for us and left, she said like, well, I want to get to where you're at. I want to own my own gym one day. And I said, like, it's just funny. Like, that's why I always try to take things to like facts. It might help that I'm not real smart. So I need things simple. So I remember saying to this girl, I said like, well, what's your goal? She says, she was married. She said, we want to travel 12 weeks a year. I said, okay. And I said, do you want kids? Yes. Who's going to be the breadwinner? I will. So she had a wife. So she said, my wife wants to stay home. I said, okay. What do you need to make to have this lifestyle and travel? And she said, I need to make $250 a year. And I said, we don't have a trainer, including yourself, who's grossed $250 a year. And she kind of got wide-eyed. And I said, I'm not knocking you, but you kind of want this lifestyle. Your goal, your actions don't line up with your goals. And your goals don't really make sense because you can't even gross it here with me feeding you clients every other day. So how, and I'm not, and I never want to.
No, it's just real.
And I never want to crowd. Everybody's like, you're a hater or you're this. It's like, I'm not a hater. It's just your math, 4 + 4 isn't 6. You're trying to make something work. It just doesn't add up. Everything's an equation. And so that's why I look at these young people and what they want they're not going in the direction of what they want. If you want to be the guru on the hill, I talked to Buddy the other day, he's riddled with arthritis. You got one shoulder left and like
two hips.
There's a cost to all this. And I'm not saying you got to go jump off a bridge and cripple yourself, but there is some level of like hours in the gym. That's your currency. The MMA guys always say your mat time is your currency. And I feel that way about the gym. Like, how long have you trained? Who have you trained? What have you gone through? And then even as a business owner, you don't just walk into, I'm sure you were here 60 hours a week when you started this place.
I'm still working way more than that.
You didn't have a Matt Goodwin or like all these people.
Yeah.
So you kind of build that over time, and these people want to jump right to it. And it's just, I wish it were that way.
Yeah. I mean, the time and investment has never changed, right? The problem, the number of problems to deal with has never changed. They're just different, right? And then the amount of time that you can't pay yourself has still never changed, over that whole period, where I don't think there's enough transparency a lot of times, especially in the coaching and personal training industry, because everybody sees what's not even real as far as the top potentials. Like if you actually really knew what a lot of these guys take home,
it's not great.
Even on the influencer side and YouTube side, if you actually saw what they actually make, you wouldn't be sitting here thinking I'm going to be making $100,000 a month or whatever it is. There may be some, but That's the top 1%. And have you put in the time to be the top 1%?
Yeah.
You know, in whatever those disciplines are. And the answer is obviously always no.
Well, how about this? All the guys around me, not all of them, but a lot of guys who didn't last in our gym, trainer-wise, they all want to be online coaches. And I always say, that's fine. You want to be an online coach. Guess what you open yourself up for? Right now, you have a ability that Josh Bryant doesn't have, Eddie Cohen doesn't have, you don't have, Stan doesn't have. You're there 3 days a week. You can walk them through everything. You can really hold their hand through this process. If you want to be an influencer, now you got to compete with Matt Wiedemer, Josh Bryant, Eddie Cohen, Stan Effort. You've opened yourself up. Why would I pay you for a program when I can get what Josh Bryant's got the best resume maybe in the online training? So why you've kind of set yourself up for a new game, and you might not like that game.
In a game that's going to be, I mean, AI is already disrupting that.
Absolutely.
So a game that AI is going to disrupt even more so, where the in-person, you know, until we have humanoid robots, you know, that can communicate better than other humans do, which may happen, you know, there's less room for disruption.
Absolutely. And I think the messenger counts. So again, why do people go to you? You're not, you're not necessarily the strongest guy to ever live, but why? Because your message counts because you've been there. You and I could read a book on military, right? We could read every book there is. We could be right. Could you imagine us showing up and saying, like, you're firing that Desert Eagle all wrong. You need to be in formation over there. They'd look at us like, get out of here. The messenger counts. And these people don't want to, they want to be the guru on the hill, but they don't want to work through what it takes to be the guru on the hill.
With the messenger part, and it was Mike Toucher that brought this up to me. I used to have a scale that I would grade coaches on.
Okay.
You know, and it was experience, education. It was like a 5-point scale. And even if the education was low, it still could be excellent because the other ones were in there.
Right.
You know, what have you personally done? Who have you trained?
Sure.
And all through there. And the one aspect that he realized when he went into jiu-jitsu, or I forget what it was he used that to be able to kind of vet, you know, who he would have be his coach.
Yeah.
And what he found was you have to be a coach. You have to have all those qualities, but know how to work with a beginner.
Yeah.
Because you can have all those qualities, of a Louie and all that other kind of stuff, but then not know how to work with somebody who's never done any of it before. Right. And that's a different skill.
That is a different skill. Yeah.
So that's a communication skill.
For sure.
To kind of work into there.
Yeah.
So I don't want to leave that out. You're right. That whole mix, because you can be the best bodybuilding coach and put the most people on the Olympia stage, but if you can't work with the person that's never touched a weight before,
that's true.
Then all your knowledge doesn't mean dick, because you won't know how to regress.
Absolutely.
Down into
I totally agree. And I think that's an advantage my trainers have had. I mean, we got 20 years of doing this. And like I said, we've had multiple Bengals, but you get the person who's never lifted. So I think they get really good at coaching. Sometimes it's like having kids, teaches you stuff like that you have to relearn. Mm-hmm. It's almost the same thing when you get a newbie. You're like, all right, how do I explain this? It's so simple, but now you got to
reframe it. Yeah.
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 The other one that kills me, I don't know how you feel about this, the online coach proliferation. Now that we have a 24-hour gym, I see more people and they're all on their phones. They got their little, my coach said 3 sets of 6. And I always think you guys should get training partners.
Yeah.
You don't need an online coach. You think like the 3 sets, like this one, she'll get mad at me. Like the one girl's like, oh, my coach has me doing 3 sets of 7. I laughed. She goes, well, I said, you think like it's the magic? It's not 6. It's not 8.
Yeah.
It's 7. I'm like, you need a training partner. That's what you need. Somebody to watch your form, tell you if it's good or bad, be honest with you, and push you.
Yeah. I ping pong back and forth with that one because I didn't grow up with that. Mm-hmm. Right. So I don't have the context of what it's like to grow up with an iPad in my hand when I'm 5 years old.
That's fair.
Right. So I don't know. You know what I'm saying? My bias would say, yeah, you should focus on the training, set it down. Personally, I can't do it. I've used apps to be able to track things, and trying to do it between sets is just fucking annoying.
Yeah.
So I just will do it afterwards. Yeah. But most of my training's kind of been that way. So I don't know, right? Because there's some context we don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's fair.
the best way to be able to know that is to have somebody that kind of grew up that way, and then they stop doing it.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then they provide that feedback between the two of those. I still think, biased opinion, that it's better just to leave it away and to focus on what you're doing, because focus is still everything.
Absolutely.
And whatever you're doing is to be able to maintain that focus and to be able to have the endurance to make, especially in business, to be able to have like that 20-minute thing. I never really work for 20 minutes and then you need to give your mind a break. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And the reason I do cardio is so I can fucking work, from, 9 in the morning until 3, take a 2-hour break, and then have stamina to be able to do the second day, which starts at 6 until 11.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, that's just business.
Yeah.
And anyhow, if I'm not conditioned enough to be able to maintain focus for longer than fucking 10 minutes on something, then you're never going to get anything done.
Yeah. When I watch the guys who I think we have like I said, we have a lot of good bodybuilders in our gym. Our gym's become a real hub. It's amazing. And I don't know if it's the equipment, we outfitted all your stuff, elite racks, benches, everything, monoliths, and it's drawn top guys, 3 pro bodybuilders, a lot of bikini girls, some serious powerlifters. But the strongest guys I watch are just the guys. It's like 2 buddies. There's 2 bodybuilders. One guy's named Rico and Cody, but they just go hard. And I'll say, what are you doing today? They're like, we'll do, today's a push day. And then they go crazy on it. And then I watch the guys who are less strong, and they're the ones walking around with the apps. And they're like, well, my last coach had me doing this. I got a new online coach. And I'm just like, get apart. Go.
No, I think they do that. There's more benefits outside of what I'm just talking about here.
It's just funny. I always think, why don't you just join those guys?
Well, you're going to get technical cues from that. You're going to get motivation from that, because you're going to want to show, you don't want to look like you're being a puss. There's a lot of other things that kind of factor into all that. But powerlifting is a weird thing. And I had this conversation with somebody last week, because if I go to open powerlifting and look at the number of competitors now, it's 50,000 that competed in the USA last year. When I was competing, it was 25,000. So it's doubled, right? But what we didn't have back then were what we would have called 3 decades ago closet bodybuilders, right? People that just do bodybuilding, but they never really want to compete. Where we have a whole lot of closet powerlifters, people that just love training those street lifts, right? Well, we would never expect those closet bodybuilders to go on this really super strict diet, get shredded, and do all the things that it takes to actually be that, right? Where the question really becomes the number of crews and training partners that would have had been there, say, 30 years ago. Is it double what it was then if you base it on that 50,000, not looking at the global thing of maybe there's 1 million people that all kind of dabble in powerlifting. Yeah. And I don't know the answer to that, because that now changes the question. Yeah. Right? Because we just lowered the demographic way down to where you do see people in every gym that are training together, and you still see crews. The question is, are they more than what they were when you were at Westside?
I don't think so. Yeah. If I look at the history, you guys had Black up in Cleveland, John Black in Cleveland. You had those the West Virginia guys, what they call them, the Wild Bunch or something. Ernie Francis team. I think and that's where you got the best lifting. I think that's what that's almost like me, just like a PSA almost thing. For anybody listening to this, find a training partner, find a good gym, or whether it's a garage gym or wherever, and then get some good training partners. I think you go so much further.
They're definitely there, because one of the things that happened with Westside that I did put together, after Louie passed, is when you were coming down, that was the only game in town. There might have been a very small group at World Gym or something like that, but that was it. So if you got thrown out of there for whatever reason, where are you going to go? Yeah. Right. So if you love the sport and you loved what you were doing, you were going to comply and deal with Louie's bullshit and all the other bullshit that would happen in there, because there was nowhere else to go. Now, over the years, there became more places to go. So then it becomes, I don't have to deal with this bullshit of do this exercise, but then why are you doing this exercise? Fuck you, I'm just going to go someplace else. Yeah. Or, I don't want to use da-da-da-da-da, then there's all these other options. I think that kind of diluted it, a little bit there. Yeah. Because of the mentality that it was kind of run. You could fit into it, you had to adapt to it. Yeah. right? But if you weren't one that wanted to adapt to it, there were no other options but to adapt to it.
Yeah, that's fair.
You see, so when there's other options, that kind of opens up there. Were there any other topics you wanted to talk about I didn't bring up?
No, I thought it was great. I think people, this is a great podcast. I know a lot of people listen to it, and they should. It's a wealth of, it's a great wealth of information. I think there's so many people. That's the other thing I take it so seriously, because I think, that's our job. Like, one of your things is to pass on. Mm-hmm. And it's why I keep going. Like I said, I mean, the gym does well. I could coast a little more, but I always feel like my job's to like help these guys.
Yeah.
And take my experience. And I think you do that really well.
Oh, thank you. I got a gift for you here.
Oh, nice.
So in there's a t-shirt, there's a training log, and then there's a coin in there that says live, learn, pass on, which I've only given those to people that I think embody the aim of the company, which you do.
I appreciate it.
Which is really cool to see your progression, over the years from high school track guy, to what you're doing now, which is just phenomenal. How can people go about finding you? BeatFitnessCincy.com or Beat Fitness on Instagram, any of them, or Beat Trainer. Those are all our handles. The bars are available now?
Bars, yeah. Go to PerillaPerformance.com. You can get, right now we're having a sale, I believe 20% off. So you can get all your protein powders, MCT oil, bars, anything you can think of, we got it.
Great. Thanks for coming out. Any final thoughts?
No, this is a great podcast.
All right.
I love it.
All right, guys, we're done.
Thanks.
All content you see on this channel and at elitefts.com is created by, take a guess, Elite FTS. If you want to help support the content, head over to elitefts.com and pick up literally anything that you need to be able to get more jacked and strong.